Good evening. This is a meeting of the Greenwich Planning and Zoning Commission. We begin with the regular meeting. This evening, the following applications are postponed. H.M. Hamilton LLC for a final site plan, 241 Ham Ave. Charles Moore for a final site plan at 63 Oaks Ridge. 160 Hamilton LLC for a final site plan at 160 Hamilton Avenue, and that will be handled administratively. We will now begin with the only application in the regular meeting, 75 Holly LLC, which is for a final site plan to change a use from office to daycare center. Mr. Levy is absent at the moment, and Mr. Lowe will be seated for Mr. Levy. Proceed, Mr. Bristol.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Bristol, representing the property owner.
Did you just say your name was Crystal Bristol? No.
I speak quickly, but a lot of people have made that mistake. Okay. Again, Christopher Bristol, representing the property owner, 75 Holly LLC, and the applicant, a proposed tenant of space in the building, Bright Horizons Daycare Centers. The proposal is to convert about 13,000 square feet of existing office space in the garage on the terrace level, which is also garage level C. It's the lowest level of the building, from office to a daycare center for about 120 students, staffed by no more than 28 staff at any one time. Coincident with the change of use conversion is also the construction of an outdoor playground, which is to the southeast portion of the site. Over here, here's the building, and here is the interior space, and here is the proposed playground. It's on the south, as I said, the southeast portion of the site along Muskrat Pond Road. So if you recall, this building has a unique property in that all the garage levels are sort of single entry only, so that without any interconnection in between the two. So the lower level that we're talking about is partially occupied by garage, partially occupied by office space. Now, one of the benefits is that because of the fact that we're taking up most of the space of the terrace level of the level that we're talking about, 13,000 out of 16,000-ish. Square feet, that most of the parking in that garage will be used by people affiliated with the daycare center. Perhaps it was unclear in the application materials, but the tenant actually has about 45 spaces of the parking garage, which is more than enough for the 28 staff that's going to be on site, as well as parents for pickup and drop-off. What I set forth to you in the application materials also was the fact that we're staggering the pickups and drop-off times in order to have a more smoother transition. This particular garage entrance is off of Holly Hill Lane, so the garage that we're talking about is up here with the entrance here. Now, as part of their procedures, I know there was some discussion with the staff briefing yesterday. Part of their procedures is that all the children have to become and walked in and checked in at the counter. So I know there's questions about whether there's a loop and drop-off sort of where you unload the cargo, if you will, unload the children to the caregivers or staff and have them bring it in the site. That's not what they do. So each of the parents bring the children in and register them and check them in on site. In terms of what I was just going to go through is just go through the points of the staff report, unless you want to do like a Q&A and start asking me questions.
What do you guys think?
I had a couple questions.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
I just finished some daycare. I don't see direct exit from the bedrooms or each room to the outside, not to a corridor.
Oh, again, in terms of what the code is, I'm leaving to the architects and the code experts.
Well, I'm just saying is your application doesn't meet daycare code. And so I
Well, again, I mean, I didn't they didn't look into that aspect of it. The Bright Horizons is an international company. They have hundreds of these sites. I was relying on their expertise. We do have to come back because we do have a number of items to address before approval, so that's one of the questions that I could pose to their code and architect people and then have that addressed when we come back. But again, I know they've done this hundreds, perhaps thousands of times, you know, as a company, so I was relying on their expertise in this regard. But there's something I'll certainly follow up with.
Have they done anything in Connecticut?
I thought so, but I would have to confirm. I mean, is there one standard? Okay, so there's that. I mean, in going to the open items and the stuff in staff report, engineering, we know that the drainage summary has to be addressed. There's an engineer from out of town, so I've actually encouraged them to engage Redness and Mead to do the drainage study, which is the firm that's been working on the site previously, so that should be up and running shortly.
Okay, so, on the drainage?
Yes.
Well, no, I'll wait, go ahead.
Okay. But again, we know that we have to prepare that, so that's something that's going to be in progress.
Okay, so, your play areas, the rubber stuff,
For the most part, yes.
is impervious, right?
It's,
Okay.
well, they tell me it's pervious.
No, but
They-
how does DPW?
but not for zoning.
Not for zoning. I have the understanding that that's why you're taking down the existing trees? Because for some reason, why are you taking down the existing trees? I guess that.
Well, I mean, we still have
The ones that
to.
would be in the play areas if you left them there.
So the question is, I mean, I know that there's a staff comment about having the live trees in the play areas.
Yeah, and afterwards, yes, there is.
But, I mean, as I said, it's something I can discuss with them. I mean, I would venture to say
So
that in terms of maintenance and as they grow, it might be more difficult to.
You can use the silver cell technology and then the roots won't bother anybody.
And there's also the
And
question about the
we-
soil depth and everything else with the ledge there. So.
Well, we're talking about the existing trees. And the existing trees have survived with the soil. So could you leave the existing trees?
We'll discuss it.
Okay,
I don't know.
so make a note to self that when
Sure.
you come back, you won't forget that item?
Of course not.
Okay. All right. Since I interrupted Mr. Bristol, does anybody else want to jump in?
Go for it.
Okay.
Was the design considered, the floor plan layout to, can you go back to the floor plan? Is trying to eliminate that very, very long hallway. It's actually taking the whole tenant space and just, you know, pushing it to the south instead of the hallway, so your vacant tenant space is at the top of your page.
So you're asking about
Yeah.
shifting everything over such that this is over there.
Mhm.
Again, these are all discussions that the landlord had independently with the applicant, with Bright Horizons, but that's something I'll talk about as well. I know that in terms of, I'm willing to bet that this had, the interior space, because they had worked on it for a long time before they got to me, had stayed static, and this was how they were going to address it. If you remember, and maybe you don't remember, but the original plan was to have the playground on the side of my own, literally on the corner. Oh, here it is.
Ollie Hill corner.
Literally right there. We were trying to put in there because, again, it has to be adjacent to the building and there has to be sort of exterior room for it. And it was fraught with difficulties up there. We thought it would be much more simple than it was. So that was out. So literally this is the only place that we could do it. I'll ask about the interior space. I'm thinking that I might be too far along for them to switch gears now, but I'll ask.
Well,
I
you may
think
have to
should
address
deal
it.
with the exiting
Yeah.
and that.
Yes, again, I mean, obviously that
If-
logically follows that question as well.
If the code in Connecticut, I mean, they may not have thought about it, but if this is a question for Connecticut code, you're gonna have to change the layout anyway.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, if it's something that has to be done, and one way or another it would be, approved differently, then obviously the licensing is licensing. Again, I know that they're well established, and it's a large company, so I was sort of deferring to their expertise in that regard, not being a code specialist myself, or certainly not with daycare licensing.
Can you go back to the plan, Mr. Bristol? Thank you.
Yes? Oh, sure.
Left, his left, Lowe's left, not, first, oh, no, wait, then, yes,
We can see it.
okay. Oh, I still have to be nice to them,
Next time I'll do the PowerPoint.
all right.
Another thing to consider, rather than the elevator as the entrance elevator lobby, maybe it's possible to actually provide a separate entrance, actually where I believe it's the door to the existing tenant space now as it is. Rather than go through the common lobby of the building, it might be safer or easier to go through a separate entrance. That way you're not encumbered by any kind of security issues or working with a common lobby. Let's see here. When you're actually at the end of the hallway going out to the playground, your extensive ramps, the ramps are metal, correct?
Yeah, they're aluminum.
Aluminum, okay. So you're actually going from the hallway up or down?
You're going from the hallway. You're going up a little bit. I mean, it calls out the slopes there. And again, I'm deferring to their codes. I'm not a code person. There's an 8.3% ramp up, and then there's a series of ramps over here to handle the different grade changes because these are a little bit different levels, and so we're going basically from a higher level down to different lower levels. These are a little bit different levels. It's not on a flat plane. And in terms of plan preparation and illustrating that point, just so you understand that we're doing some different sections for ARC. So by the time we come back to you next time, you'll have a better understanding of what the elevations are as we give you some sections.
And again, for an ADA ramp, you can't have an 8% ramp. I'm just saying.
I understand the points. I'll have them double check. You know, again, that's certainly something I wouldn't picked up on. I'm not the
Well,
good person.
we just did a daycare at the Temple on Orchard and spent a lot of time
Mm.
about
It's not easy.
ADA and equity. So again, it would behoove you to go sit down with the building officials and make sure your plan in front of us is approvable, because you don't want to have to get an approval and then come back with a whole new plan.
I agree. Very inefficient.
And then people say that we're inefficient.
Well, no, well, this one is clearly, I mean, it's clearly us being reactionary.
Is the parking garage open all day to any occupant of the building?
It's gated, and no, this one will be solely dedicated to this level.
So if I was working upstairs, I would not be able to park here during the day and go up the elevator to go.
It would be done by rules. I mean, I guess there's a gate. The space is gated. I don't anticipate a key entry or anything for any one person, but so it would be like an hours base at the end of the day, sort of overnight.
What I'm getting at is that when drop-off is done, kids are there, children are playing, okay, during the day, now the garage fills up with other tenants. Now we come to pick up, and the parents are looking for parking spaces here, that kind of thing.
It goes by garage level. All the garage levels are basically working with the level of the building.
So this will be dedicated
Exactly.
specifically for, okay.
Yes, that's correct.
What about the leftover tenant space?
It's probably going to be office. I mean, I can't see anything else being there. So there's about 3,000 square
Okay, so
feet of
we'll
office.
have actually-
And that I'm telling you that garage will also be used for those parking spaces. Again, there's 62 parking spaces on this level. We only need 28 in terms of the regulations. In terms of the lease, we have about 45 spaces there. So the remainder will be used for that other office.
Getting
space.
into a conflict issue here, because I think what we're looking at is that we have a lot of drop-off, a lot of pickup. It's actually creating a situation where parents are coming into a garage that has dead-end aisles. They're parking, bringing children to the door, bringing them in.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of vehicle movement in a very, very constrained garage. I know that you've been in there, so have I.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to kind of maneuver around in there, thinking as a situation with children in tow.
Right, so what you're really looking for, what we'd like to see is how the vehicles are going to circulate, how it's gonna work. Because if somebody pulls in and parks and somebody else is pulling out, how are you gonna do it? So So you're gonna have to show that that circulation is safe. Now, while I cut into Mr. McRae, one of the things that he's saying is he's talking about safety, and you heard us raise it yesterday.
Mhm.
What we did with the last big daycare that we looked at, and we've looked at a couple recently, is we talked to the chief, and it would be good if the company does talk to GPD and make sure that the precautions necessary for the safety of the children. One thing we do know, and this is where Mr. McRae was going, you don't want random adults to be able to get in where the daycare is. Okay?
Correct.
You just don't want that nowadays for the reasons that, so one of the things that, and we aren't party to that conversation, but we'd like to know that it's been had and that the chief is comfortable. It's got nothing to do with zoning regulations, but the purpose of our regulations is to, as you know, one of them is to make sure people are safe. So if GPD is okay with it, we're okay with it. Is that a good way of doing it, Katie?
And when you,
Because that's what Chief Heavey basically said to you and me when did the other one, is it's not a zoning business, but it behooves you, and there are guidelines now that have been developed, and maybe they're in Stanford already, but they could have been there for a long time, whatever. Just make sure that those are being met, on top of the fire egress, which Andy raised, Mr. Fox raised. But I think that's where you were going, right?
Yeah.
So Mr. McRae is saying one, the security, because of the elevators, where somebody could get off and wander around. Then the other thing is also a security and safety issue is this thing you were talking about, how the cars circulate for
Right.
drop-off.
It's almost to the point of actually having Mr. Adler take a peek at the layout of the garage and see if there's a more efficient way of laying things out because of the dead-end aisles, because of the narrowness, that kind of thing. You know, is it a possibility to actually take your dedication of your employee parking and put it towards the back of the garage? That way, there's more open spaces towards the front for the.
some of these questions that we're sort of talking about are cross over into each other and dictate the result of the other. You know, if this configuration were to remain and this were the other 10 space, I'd almost be more inclined to have the employee parking for over here be over in this level, so they're sort of over on that side and stuck over here, and then everyone else can sort of use these.
Well, you guys figure
But,
it
oh,
out.
yeah, no, I know.
Don't redesign it on the fly. What
Yeah.
we're saying is do it so it's safe.
Sure.
While we're talking about safety, there are two things we mentioned yesterday, and one we've got an answer on. When you're doing the drop-off,
Yes.
you have, should we wait till Mr. Tessie's done? Okay, so we got an answer back from DPW on the
Yes.
transfer facility.
Yes.
Their peak starts at 9 o'clock. So if anything, if Mr. Adler would look at that, their peak is 9 a.m. to 12 noon, was it? Pretty sure that's right.
There's 7 to 9:30, 11 to
Okay.
1:30, and 2 to 3. Now now if you look at
Sorry, no, I got a,
What?
no, I got a different thing. I got peak, no, but I got a different thing. I asked yet another question.
Oh, okay.
And then I told them to call up the person at the weigh booth.
Okay.
Because they weren't telling me, boom. And what they said is,
Yep.
its peak is, Monday to Friday, 9:30, 11 a.m., no, this isn't right,
Do you want the other one?
yeah.
The one on Saturday is 9 to 12:30, Monday to Friday
Okay,
typically 7 to
so
9:30.
here you've got the thing for Mr. Adler to look at is what do we need to do about this vehicle? They also gave us the volume numbers. Those big trucks are coming in and out. Yeah, have you seen how, okay, the big trucks are coming in and out. That's their peak. And you also have everybody, you've got 60 cars coming into your site to drop off kids at between 7:45 and 8:45 a.m., according to Adler. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, are you gonna have an issue there? in terms of traffic and in terms of safety, because you've got cars and big trucks. And those big trucks are in a hurry.
Sure. No, I mean, it's,
Okay?
yeah.
So we'd like you guys to look at that.
I can give you a statement.
All right. Okay, so if you would look at that, okay. Nick, do you have anything else?
Just to keep in, actually, we had discussed previously with this building, and it's successful, just to maintain your directional signage. I think actually what's very interesting is that actually because, like you said before, each one of the garages is dedicated.
Yes.
I think it's actually working successfully now, where you get people from the front door to the garage they're supposed to be, and then actually internally in the circulation of where in the building. Same thing with this, if this is gonna be dedicated for just the daycare center, to make sure that that entrance is configured in such a way, so.
Signage is the next, no, I agree. I mean,
Okay. Just because I think it's actually to make sure you don't want it to fill up with other people, and, you know, at the same time.
we did the same thing with the Stanford Hospital garage over on the Muscat
Exactly,
Pond.
that's what I mean.
If
It
you
worked out
look,
really
there's the signage over that one. The plan would be to do something similar to that.
Um,
And the directional as well on the site.
Now, ARC had a host of things. Do you have the current minutes from them?
Yeah, I got those. So those have been transmitted to my clients who have been working on them.
And there's a significant drop between the parking lot and the grades of the playground itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we go down. You know what I mean? So basically we start at this, you know, the land starts at the parking lot level and it goes down from there.
Mhm.
Now, I mean, although we're still, 86, we're still 15 or more feet with that rock ledge that goes up. So we're still elevated 15 feet or so from the road. So that we're well above the cars and everything else that are and trucks that are traveling along the road. So in terms of that, that's good.
Okay, and those few spaces that are there will have bollards in front of them to prevent any kind of car from
They
rolling in.
They will, because I think that was one of ARC's concerns, and that's one of the things that we're going to put in the next plan, are some bollards over there.
Not to make the bollards orange.
Okay.
They give in the down parking lot.
Okay, so,
YMCA has nice gray bollards with enough orange, a little stripe.
Just a little accent.
all right, on the things that ARC raised for you, Conservation raised the other, another issue, which we're adding to.
Mhm.
If you could look to maintain the existing trees, the mature trees, because those have survived on ledge and iffy areas, try to keep them. And then conservation, I think ARC, the landscape person picked this up. What you're proposing doesn't work with the soil, okay? So, come back with something that works with the soil.
That's one of the things that they're checking, either the soil depth or adjusting plantings to.
The other
to make
thing
it
ARC raised, and I raise it for you for a safety and visibility issue, is to not have that just be chain link. I'd like it to be solid. Again, after you talk to GPD, you'll know for sure. But I think it's better if there's no way that you can get visibility into the playground from the external areas,
So you're talking about a complete boundary of solid fence?
around the external perimeter.
Yeah, exactly. So around the.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be extravagant, but I think it's safer. Again, that's the chief's call, because they have the national guidelines.
Let me ask you this: so if the chief is okay with the chain link, and my client prefers chain link, can we still go with the chain link?
ARC still wants the.
ARC didn't say anything about a solid fence.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, where?
They wanted vinyl paneling. I remember seeing that.
We didn't talk about that.
I know that when I read it, provide alternatives for the proposed chain link fence. It's in there, actually, I knew I'd seen it. Okay, so
Yeah,
it's
but,
in there. They wanted alternatives.
Their alternatives actually were like the mesh, the slotted kind. I mean, they didn't say solid like it would be a panel type fence. But
It's, if the chief is okay with it not being solid, then do whatever ARC thinks is
Okay.
cost effective and looks.
so your concern's safety.
My concern is safety, theirs is aesthetics.
Mhm.
I'm number one worried about all these children in there.
Well,
Okay?
Yeah,
And
I mean,
that's our
again,
job.
we wouldn't, you know, safety is their paramount concern. I understand everyone's concerned about safety,
Ours.
but certainly they are as well. So I don't.
No,
it's-
ARC's job isn't safety, I hope.
No, actually, I was talking about my clients.
Okay,
So.
the screen and planting requirements, you're gonna address all the ARC issues, so you're good with that.
Yeah,
So
and then just out of curiosity, the screening and planning, the 6180 compliance, you're talking about where the property bounds to the apartments in the back, because that regulation deals with separation with a residence zone, right? Now, just on that note, again, we have to provide you with more information anyway, but if we were here before you twice for 2 parking lot expansions, and those included landscape plans as well. So there's an existing landscape plan that deals with the plantings over on that side there, but I'm gonna take a look at it. My client actually was saying he might put more trees there anyway, just because he prefers to boost up the screening there, so it might be something we're gonna do anyway.
Did they send you a copy of the answer? We asked P and Z staff with young children to give us input today.
Yes, Ms. Pruitt's email, I saw.
Yeah, okay, so they're looking for shade.
We have the shade structures that are already approved and designed.
Trees are nicer.
Well, we'll take a look at the vibe. I can't promise anything, given what we're gonna do, but
All right, folks,
we do have some, they are preserving some ledge there as well, I believe, so that's
Mr.
kind of nice.
Yeski's ready.
Yes, Ms. Yeski.
Mr. Bristol?
Yes.
Has anybody from New Horizons, the expert, that they do lots of these, right?
Yes.
Have they been involved in the ARC meeting?
Oh, yes.
Are they gonna come here to us in the next meeting?
Yes.
Because a lot of these questions, they're the experts at doing these, right? We like to see it, all right, just.
No, I know, I knew that we couldn't ascertain an approval because we had to deal with the drainage summary report. And because they're all from out of state, they keep flying back in, and they were just, so for this one, I said I'll take in all the questions and then we'll deal with it because we know we have to come back. So we'll provide a response between now and the time that we come back. I thought that was,
I'm happy, got it.
well, did you have any,
So Mr. Yeski would be interested in talking to the applicant.
I'm telling you, yes, I agree that they're gonna come next time as well.
Anybody else? We left
Sewer's
anything out?
okay. We got the side yard variance, screening, parking drop-off. Cut and fill info will provide information about the interior corridor, which we'll also provide, and it's based upon sort of that discussion that we had about shifting the space around in there. But I mean, everything seems to me to be addressable. It's a matter of just providing the information and sort of talking some of these design
Right,
issues
with
out.
your drainage issue, I think your biggest issues are these code issues that Mr. Fox raised.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I gave them a lot of credit for being experts in their field. So, but if this is something that they should be aware of,
You're gonna show
we should
the
be.
layout. You're gonna talk to Mr. Adler a little bit about how the traffic works, how the circulation's gonna
Yes.
work. You're gonna look at whether or not you really
columns
have
don't
to-
make it columns make it a little bit difficult.
You're gonna have to look at whether you can get away from being in the elevator lobby.
Mhm.
You're gonna look at the surrounding truck traffic in the morning. I don't know if the Ham Ave crush, the school crush, impacts you. I'm hoping it doesn't, because, St. Rock just totally freezes,
Mm. Oh, yeah, yes.
okay? I don't know if Mr. Adler looked at that, but
I mean,
you can't get up and down.
I mean, that was one of the intersections started. There was the intersection over at
Yeah.
the St. Rock side, the one over at Weaver and West Putnam.
The other question, since Mr. Adler isn't here, he's assuming we're gonna be able to get the concurrent pedestrian phase on the light and the timing change.
Yes.
What happens to his level of service if he doesn't get both? I think that was one of the questions Beta raised.
Okay.
And with that, I'm gonna mark that. Okay. All right, well, anybody else, anything, folks?
We gotta
Okay.
come back.
We'll see you later. Okay, and with that, we begin the public hearing. Our first application on the public hearing is O&B Associates LLC for a final site plan and special permit at 561 West Putnam Avenue. This is, was a discussion item previously. Hello, Mr. Haslam, how are you?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Chip Haslam from Johnson, Haslam, and Hogaman for the applicants. With me tonight are the principals of Riverside Service. Behind me, Albert and Heather Jagosinski. I have a handout I want to give you.
Sorry. You're the leader in chamber.
Oh.
Probably don't need to hang on to this plan, do I? Got this plan, oh, don't get me confused.
Okay.
much towing service in town?
That's back 27 years ago.
Oh.
So there's two sheets. The first sheet shows when my clients first started their business in Greenwich 27 years ago,
Wow.
and shows the amount of repair shops here at that time, and then and the towing companies at the same time. And then you'll see today the reduction in repair shops significantly, and also towing companies. And I should add to that too that Riverside is the only one that's actually based in Greenwich, and the other two have relationships with Preferred Auto Body and Postcode Auto Body, neither of which have any space for rigs on their property. So they're coming from out of town when they're responding to service calls. So it's really a situation, and I think we talked about in the briefing session yesterday, there certainly is a need for this service in the town of Greenwich. And they perform a tremendous service, not just for individuals whose cars are broken down, but also they respond to Greenwich Police Department calls, State Police Department calls on 95, and they do DUIs, they do collection of cars that are illegally parked in town, et cetera. So I think that you all recognize that there's a demonstrated need for this. It's just a question if this is the right spot for the particular service, the towing aspect of it at least. The vehicle service has historically been here since, we believe, prior to World War II, according to the transcripts from the ZBA and various hearings with regard to this property. The first actual record of anyone appearing before the ZBA to get approval for the service station was in 1950. And then in 1969, Judge Lewis appeared, he was then an attorney, before the ZBA and asked for a third bay at this location. And at that time, he indicated gratuitously that there would be no outdoor repair and no outdoor storage. And it was that issue which I thought was the subject of the cease and desist issuing from the ZBA, or from the ZEO rather, which I took an appeal from. There were two parts of my application to the ZBA. The first was questioning the decision of the ZEO, finding that cars being parked that are being serviced at the location were actually in storage. My point being that storage is a separate section or separate use in your regulations, different from repair. And also my clients were not accepting any payment for leaving cars there. In fact, I can't under state regulations. If a car's under repair at the station, you cannot charge a storage fee until the repair is finished. So they were doing neither, and that was going to be my argument. In addition, of course, they had taken occupancy just 5 years ago. Prior to that, the owners had actually used the station for their own business, and that was Rusty Oxer's service station. And for those of you who have been in Greenwich for many years, as you know, since the Oxers took over the building in 1983, that there's historically been cars parked overnight and trucks. The Oxers business was predominantly servicing large trucks on this location. So it seemed to me and it seemed to my clients when they leased the premises that this was an acceptable use to park vehicles on the outside and trucks, including their towing rigs. So we went to the ZBA, and Eric Brower was there representing Mr. Ferrari, who owns property across the street from this particular lot, and he's interested in putting in some residential units over there, 65 units, I think. And Eric raised a good point, which is he had discovered, which the ZEO and I had not, that in a improperly recorded section of the ZEO's office, there was, in fact, subsequent applications made to the ZBA in 1983 and 1984. And the 1984 application was indicated that they wanted to add to the back of the building, and it added, as far as the conditions were concerned, again gratuitously, agreed that there would be no overnight outdoor parking, that there was sufficient space inside. So Eric, having found that decision, it was obviously critical to my argument as far as the storage was concerned, and I therefore dropped my my appeal from the ZEO's decision and actually went forward with the request that we be given relief from the prior condition as to outdoor parking. I indicated that I was willing to create some sort of a site plan for the ZBA, and subsequently Eric indicated that he thought that we would have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for site plan approval for that kind of use, and the commission then later chimed in as a discussion item, and you indicated as well that you felt that this required site plan approval, which is why we're before you tonight. But I'm also before you asking for a special permit for the use, which is a towing use. It falls under use group 5, I believe, because there is no specified towing use in your regulations at all. So I think it falls under other. And under use group 5, that would mean that it would be subject to a special permit from the Planning and Zoning Commission, recognizing, of course, that I would still have to go back to the ZBA to deal with the issue of overnight parking for the repair facility.
You heard our discussion yesterday. We were thinking that unless the state says otherwise, that towing could be considered a part of the service, which means you would go to ZBA on it. Katie, Patty,
Yes.
were we able to find anything out about the state?
I will tell you that you cannot have,
Hold on a second. Were you just gonna say something, or? Oh, that was why your mouth was moving and no sound was coming out.
I did speak to the zoning enforcement officer. He was going to look into what, if any, licenses were required for just towing services. But his recollection is that there's not a towing business is usually pertinent to a service. So
So we were seeing it yesterday. You guys all agree that that's what we were thinking, that towing is part of service, and that's how it had been treated in the past.
I think that's right, and that's initially how I was going to go forward with this. And I may be belt and suspendering it right now,
But you would be ZBA on that, back to,
if that's what the commission ultimately decides. I heard Mr. Macri say yesterday that perhaps it looked more like two different businesses. Mr. Lowe said something similar about that too. Whether is the towing different from the repair business? And there is an overlap, clearly, because they do tow vehicles in there to be
Yeah.
repaired too. But they have a storage facility in Stamford, so that all the cars that are in collisions or that DUIs or illegally parked, that's where they get stored.
And when you say repair, and it's noted on your sheet here, is that body repair or engine repair?
It's engine repair and other parts of the car. It's not, you don't do any body work. It's just
like I broke
mechanical,
down?
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And so that's the nature of that business. I also am,
I'm sorry, one more question. So is that considered a service? Is that the approval that you have from the zoning board of appeals for service?
yes, and that's been the case since 1950.
And so now the question, I think, is whether towing is incorporated into that.
That's the
is that where you're
question.
going?
That is
Yeah.
a question, right. And I thought I heard some members saying, well, maybe this is more than just ancillary to
Yep.
the mechanical aspects.
was the
That's
discussion.
That's why I thought,
So when are you on the ZBA agenda?
well, we have to go back. Unfortunately, what happened was, in applying to you folks, we ran out of time with the ZBA, so I had to withdraw the application, so I'm gonna have
Now
to
you're going back,
reapply.
okay.
But I want to get some feel from you
So
folks first.
I think the thing, have you tried to research it at the state level in terms of licenses, like what we're trying to do? And
It is clear that in order to have a towing license, you have to have a repair
your
license.
client would like to speak.
So those are integrated.
Client would like to speak.
Albert, introduce yourself.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Albert Jagosinski.
You're gonna have to spell that for the court reporter.
Jagodzinski.
You got that, Mr. Court Reporter? He's got it, okay.
In the state of Connecticut, if you'd like to have record plates, which the state mandates that we have on the tow trucks, you need to have a repairs license. So you'd have to have a good standing repairs license in order to do towing. You just can't do towing with a record plate without the repairs license.
Okay, so towing is intrinsic, repair is intrinsic to towing,
Yes.
okay.
So it sounds like it's just a matter of getting that on the record with the ZBA, and then at the same time asking them, as you note here, that to amend that original condition about no storage. Or clarify what storage means.
Yeah.
That might be the problem too. It's just.
Yeah, the cars that we have in Greenwich are just repair customer cars. We don't do any body work. All the other cars, if you got in an accident, if you didn't have registration, you were driving without a license, all those cars go to our storage yard in Stamford, because then it takes time for somebody to get their license back, get their car registered, the insurance company to come look at a wrecked car. We don't do any of that in Greenwich. It's just the turnover of repairs.
And so if you had like an Audi or something that has their own service, but you wanted to go to you, that's an option also, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not just coming in from towing.
Nope.
Okay. Oil change, blah, blah, blah.
Anything.
All that, right.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
One of the issues that was raised, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Mr. Lowe.
somebody's had a question at the end? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Lowe.
Quick question. One is, you present us with a historical data on the number of service stations operating in town, and the number of towing vehicles operating in town. Do you also have data giving us some idea of the amount of demand for services in town?
I can't give you, maybe Albert can give you the repair, but I can tell you that they have their calls number in the thousands each year. I mean, I think it's 10,000, something like that.
Yeah, we're the primary provider in a AAA approved auto repair for Greenwich. So just our Greenwich customers that we service for AAA is right around 11,000 service calls. That could be a tow, a flat tire, your electric keys in your car, you ran out of gas. You have it annually.
One follow-up question. What portion of your business is towing? Or the towing operation?
It's maybe 50-50, 55-45.
Okay, so, I think that's not really a part of the zoning issue, as long as, what we have to decide is how it's related, and I think if we'll double check it, but what you're saying makes sense to me, that it's part of the service business, so you're back to zoning board of appeals on that, and leaving us just with the site plan stuff, kinda how we're seeing it, how we were seeing it
Yeah,
yesterday.
if you opened up a repair shop, say the Audi dealer,
Right.
the Audi dealer actually has a repairs license to service cars.
Right.
So if they wanted to get in the towing business, they could get in the
They
towing
could.
business because they have a repairs license.
Right,
So,
but then they'd have to be up late at night.
It's no fun sometimes, but yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson, see while you're at the microphone, still a quick question. Does the dealer repair license require that you actually have a facility to repair vehicles? Or is it just a license for you to do that work?
No, when they come to do, you have to have a facility, you have to have your lifts, your tools, all that stuff, all has to be in that facility where you're gonna do business.
Okay, thank you.
The state actually comes down, DMV will come and do a physical inspection before they grant you your repairs license.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to point out, too, that when we talk about the number of trips that they have or calls that they make, those calls aren't tows back to the Greenwich facility or necessarily even out of the facility. Once the tow trucks leave, they're parked at various locations, and they respond as they need to. There's also a question raised at the briefing yesterday about whether, in fact, the cars that are parked at the facility are actually being repaired. The packet that I gave you, Heather identified every single car on the lot, as well as the repair invoice or the repair slip for those cars, and most of them were dropped off in September. There's a couple anomalies. One's April of last year, but it's a Hummer. They're having difficulty getting the parts. As Albert said, they prefer to get it off the lot because then they can get paid, but that's it. So you have all the cars that are on the location. Currently, the property is non-conforming in several ways, either legally non-conforming or it has been given a variance, so that the building is non-conforming as to all the setbacks and will remain that way. Obviously, we're not changing that because of the change in use. The lot coverage is non-conforming. I think we can make that better, make it less non-conforming. The parking is non-conforming, depending on how you interpret what the ZBA has indicated, whether there's no parking at all outside or no parking overnight or whatever, but it is in the front yard in the required setback. And it's currently non-demarcated, so there's no indication of exactly where the aisles are. It's non-conforming as to your screening and requirements, and it's non-conforming because there's a sign that's located where it's not supposed to be and at a height that it's not supposed to be. So I think what we could do, as far as the site plan is concerned, is clean this up a bit.
Yes.
And what I'm suggesting is we take it back to the engineer and a landscape architect and take some of your suggestions to heart and those from DPW. And essentially, first of all, get rid of these two spaces in the front here.
Yeah, and the problem is that it works so nice, so that it worked out great if you have 15 spaces for the 3 bays, and then you have then they get these spaces for the truck, you would rather have the landscaping and be short, okay, because
Here-
they're non-conforming for parking right now, so
I
we
mean,
could do
I
that,
just-
okay.
I think that
Everybody
we
kinda
made a
good with
big-
that? Okay,
Well-
Made a big push to landscape
yeah,
West
Okay.
Putnam Avenue, and I think
that's the key.
Well, that's the thought. So if we got rid of these two spaces in the front,
Yes.
this is state property here,
Yes,
down.
yes.
we
You
said,
need to,
We have 30 or 40 feet of setback from the actual highway.
right,
I will make a good faith effort to work with the state and seeing if they will allow us to landscape this further. Albert has been taking care of it with mowing it and planting it, et cetera, and same in the back here. But we will make a good faith effort there. But I also proposed that in the front here, we could create a screening bed and add some bushes, et cetera, right there. We have some space over here. I'd get rid of that non-conforming sign. That would go away. You've got plenty of sight line as you come around the corner, because as I said, this is 30 feet here, so that would be good. We can get rid of the guardrail, which is now extending into across the property.
right.
Instead, make it along the property line. We'd make it like at the Merit, it would be wood rather than metal, and attractive.
can you plant the triangles at the end of the long bays to try to get any better buffer on?
In this
Valley?
area here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
You know,
Where's the other one?
along the super long parking bay.
This one here? Oh, no.
No, behind the parking,
Along, parking one is where you probably are, right, parking one?
Right here?
you know,
Where the tow trucks.
where the tow trucks are going.
Here?
Right there, those little triangles.
Yeah,
There's four
They're
of
not
them.
gonna, they don't access, one of the things that we didn't know yesterday is, do the tow trucks drive in through Valley?
No,
Ever?
because they can't make that turn here. They'd have to go up and around to do it, and come down.
everybody would
So
hate them for that,
they can
okay.
actually, if we make this one way, it was also suggested by DPW, they can, and they do now, come in and they back up into those spots. So they could do that,
Okay,
and that's a solution.
Why do they back out into the road now? Because they could do that now. Why doesn't that happen now?
because they're always in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Albert and Heather about that today, and they said that their drivers are instructed not to do that. So if that happens, that should be a
Yeah,
rarity,
I've
if
never
anything,
I
but,
haven't seen it in a while, I will say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seemed to be the regular.
so we'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
This is grass back here. It was actually just asphalt all chipped up and whatnot and been let
right,
go.
and you're grassing it.
It's, you're right, Albert's grassed that as well. And these are bushes already over here, which provide adequate screening.
Yeah.
If you want us to, we could pull these couple spots back and do more, but
To
Let
Mr.
your landscape
Yeah.
designer see what he can do to green this space up. Trees, bushes,
okay.
because it's pretty barren now.
Yeah, I think, again, I don't have a lot of control over the state property, but I'll see what I can do. But this, I think we can do some things with. And if you wanted, we might be able to put some parking spaces up here, but I'd rather keep it green,
Yeah,
if possible, right?
I agree.
Okay.
And I think the state doesn't mind some landscaping.
I don't think they like trees just because of the like.
Yeah.
Right.
Bushes.
I think we can do, we're thinking of doing boxwoods, some low-level
And,
stuff.
I
And,
mean,
Pollinated pathway
okay.
could be
Yeah.
interesting, actually.
little butterfly bushes, things.
Yeah.
So basically where, what you're hearing us say is the big push was, and we're very clear that this is a vital service for the town. We never had any doubt about that. We know that people rely on it heavily. The fact that they have the contract with AAA makes it doubly so. But people wanted the post road to look better. And sometimes people say, how come you have a rule against parking in the front yard? But that's why, because you don't want everything to look like a car
Right.
lot. So if you can do this, it would be great.
Okay. So I think our next step would be to actually put this to a landscape architect in our site plan, come up with something else, come back before you and show you the plan before we file it with the ZBA. Is that?
We just made sure you didn't, no, I think if we like the landscaping, we're good. We can have people look at the landscaping, you don't have to. That works. Is it easier, can we see the landscaping? Can you have staff look at the landscaping so they can go to ZBA? I mean, once we've agreed, I mean, if staff reviews the landscaping, you don't have to come back before us. If they're happy with it,
Okay.
you don't have to come back before us, before you go to ZBA. As long as somebody's given a look-see Katie knows exactly, I mean, what's in the POCD, the draft POCD about, you know, the post road corridor and
Right.
all of that. Everybody knows what's in there, so that's what we're looking for.
Okay, all right. I mean, I think we're just trying to basically pick up where some of the dealerships have picked up. They have front yard parking, et cetera, but they're landscaping, and we get it.
And
So-
we actually, that's, comes from a lot of heavy leaning on the dealerships, that
Right.
it's closing the barn door after the horse is gone to some extent, but it's trying to fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, we'll put some pen to paper
Katie,
and.
did you
and-
wanna add something?
Well, I mean, so there,
Dennis,
the
were you adding something, did you? Okay. Okay.
We're gonna review the, planting plan and all that, and then they'll come back to you after they get the ZBA.
Yeah, if
So
you
that-
have a huge issue with the planning plan, then, you know, it'll fall through, but if we can make it work, you could move it.
Okay, that sounds great by me. Eric may have different opinion on this, but
Okay.
that's
I
good by us.
think the key is that it not be an eyesore. That, I believe, is the issue.
And I think
For the
in all
neighbors.
seriousness, that pollinator
Sidewalk.
pathway thing could be something really neat right here.
Okay.
Conversation about that.
Ask Mr. Hassett.
I'm just asking, where do the sidewalks start and stop? I think we've got a lot of office on that north side of the road. And it looks like it just stops at this corner, and I think I think we need to make provisions for a sidewalk, because at some point in time, across the street could happen. I also think as the sidewalk's coming down the post, it looks like the old post road, it kind of stops. I want it thought about, so it's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm looking at Google Earth, so.
Behind us, where the office building is next to me, there's a sidewalk,
Yeah.
and then it stops. And there's the entrance to the office park,
Yeah.
and then the sidewalk picks up on the other side of the street. And then in front of us, the sidewalk isn't down till here, and across us is all grass, and there's no sidewalk.
Right.
Except to when you get to this corner.
So we should just have your landscape, and we should plan for it, because we're requesting the sidewalk and kind of that space.
So are you talking about within the town right of way, that the sidewalk would be placed?
No, I'm
There's a
thinking-
sidewalk over this side.
I'm talking about on the post road. I'm
Oh, okay,
You gotta go to
That's way down
DOT
here.
for that.
yeah.
Well,
Because that's all state. You look at where the
I know
state,
where it
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, so yeah, you're
I
talking
just
to
think we
DOT
should
about
be
trees.
thinking about.
See where it goes, but we've been thinking about sidewalks a lot too. But the key, I think, is to get the cars less visible, the site be cleaner. I mean, cleaner visually, I'm not
Yep.
saying
Right.
it's,
We can do it.
okay.
I had a comment, two things. As far as the pollinator pathway, there's a beautiful one at the corner of the Post Road and Mason Street at the northwest in front of McLaughlin Clothing Store.
Mm-hmm.
And question two is for Katie, is the pollinator pathway is not green all year. So that needs to be, we need to think through whether we
Good
prefer
point.
pollinator pathway or
You want
evergreen.
evergreen.
Or both, maybe
You
Yeah, I
want
both.
think,
screening.
yeah, I think the key thing is because of the sightline issue, as Mr. Housen's got on their property, he had a little blue squiggle there that was gonna be, I thought some sort of hedge or low-lying something or other that would be that would serve the purpose that you're referring to. I was more thinking in the circular part.
Oh, and
Because remember you offered up landscaping where that parking is now?
right.
So that could be something more evergreen and,
So
sturdy.
the pollinator concept in the state's right of way, and then the evergreen back when you get on our property.
As a suggestion,
Okay.
let's see what a landscape architect has to say. I mean, it might not work for various reasons. but-
Okay. And
So
what the
is
state has to say
that-
too. Right.
So if we're good with that, I think, if the commission's good, we could go to public comment. From the public, who wishes to speak first? Is that you, Mr. Brown?
Good evening, Eric Brower. I'm here tonight on behalf of two entities, Greenwich Park LLC and 500 WPA LLC. Those are the two entities controlled by John Ferrari, which are the 500 West Putnam Avenue that is on the south side of the post road of this frontage, the property, and also on the west side of Valley where the office parks are. Before we get started, I just wanted to hand in, for the record, letters that were prepared and submitted as part of your discussion item. One is a May 24th letter to the chair, April 22nd to Jody Couture, and April 29th to Katie DeLuca and Pat LaRoe. These letters explain more detail the background history from ZBA. So I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on the history because it was kind of glossed over a little bit, and then help add to the thinking of whether this towing operation is actually part of or subordinate. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here, I think, in apparently authorizing them to go to the board without really seeing a site plan for what you have. This essentially is the same parking sketch that was submitted 4 months ago when they appeared before you for the discussion item. So we were hoping, and had written in those letters and suggested to everybody involved, let's show a site plan. Let's have dimensions, have screening, have the zoning statistics, the coverage, everything that would let you know what you're actually evaluating. We don't have that. The dimensions are deficient throughout, and we don't have the required parking. It's three bays times 5, plus 1 per employee, plus the retail component. So as a minimum, we need 20 spaces without having the trucks. Right now, it's proposed that the tow trucks are interchangeable with parking spaces. So we're all good with trying to make the site look better, but I think we need to start with an actual real site plan. Mr. Fox picked up an important point, and that is sidewalks, and that would be part of any site plan to show what's going on. The zoning regulations actually require sidewalks in business zone frontages. So this is a new application that's before you. It never had a site plan review. It was only authorized for sales and service as a pre-existing gas station way back in the 50s. So what I'd like to do is just walk through a little bit, if you bear with me. There's a lot in the handouts, which you can obviously just take home and look over. We don't need to digest them in detail tonight, just because this will be being held open. So in the first package that's coming down is pertinent copies of 3 of the 5 ZBA approvals that were granted for this project. And this came up at the ZBA meeting as well as during your discussion session. The mystery of where this prohibition came from as to why there can't be any outside parking. And the other part is outside storage or outside repair. And we really haven't discussed that because certainly, as you'll see later in the photos I've handed out and what you've probably seen driving by, is a significant amount of repair goes on outside in front of the 2 or 3 bays as cars are being moved around constantly. So there's that issue, but just to be clear, there was no mistake. The same applicant came to the Board of Appeals 3 different times, seeking first to add a bay, then to expand the project, and then to go to a general repairs license. And in each case, multiple ZBA members reminded the applicant or asked him if he was aware of the prohibitions, and each time the applicant said, absolutely, but if you let us add or make bigger, that'll absolutely take away any problem with outside storage for overnight for our vehicles. So it was a bona fide quid pro quo. Everybody knew what was going on 3 separate occasions. So we obviously do have a violation of that, and ZBA does have the authority to condition or modify conditions relating to motor vehicle sales and service. But the next issue we get to is really whether or not towing is a normal part of a service station operation or if it's different. So if you'll bear with me for a minute. So I think just saying that because you need a repairs license in order to get a towing license is not dispositive of the issue. I think you have an opportunity to exercise your own analysis and judgment as to what constitutes something being subordinate part of or a totally separate use. So the first,
Why wouldn't we, like we do what is motor vehicle sales, we base it on the state statute, not our own? So why in this case would we not be relying on the state's process?
well, because if you were to abrogate your authority on that basis, that would allow a towing operation to have one repair bay and 1,000 trucks or 2,000 trips per day, and it would be then, quote, service. So at some point, you can use different measures or indices of what makes sense, but at the end of the day, 10,711 service calls is an awful lot of calls that is not typical of what you would have with a 3-bay repair shop. So I think the business is a little more amorphous than we're being told. There's trucks that are throughout the town, day and night, underneath I-95 in Cos Cob, at Hudson Bank next to CVS, and all places which is good to be ready to jump on to 95 and help people. So we're on the same page, that makes sense. But as part of this testimony, you'll see here, the operator owner indicated that overnight that they could have up to 8, 12 trucks, and that it is a large operation. 8 or 9 trucks they would have overnight, in addition to the ones that are on the road. So it's a 24-hour towing operation, and everybody's now agreeing that we can work with 15 parking spaces and some trucks, but we've seen historically, as you'll see in those aerial photographs, street photos, over a period of years, that there's been 40 cars there and 6 or 8 tow trucks. So yes, in the last 3 days, the site's been reduced quite a bit, and it was reduced a little bit from the ZBA hearing, and that just shows that either the business dropped substantially, which is not likely, or that there's other sites where they're able to actually handle these cars where they're being towed to. And ultimately, I think that's the solution. So what we said at the Board of Appeals, a certain number of overnight vehicles certainly makes sense because cars can't be repaired in 8 hours all the time. And it makes sense to have tow trucks, 2, 3 maybe, but not 8. And those 4 trucks, 6 trucks today take up a considerable amount of the area that actually is needed for parking. The photos, if you look through them, also show that whatever layout is shown that could be created with paint on the asphalt is totally unenforceable, and the 5 years of photos and aerials show you that the site is continuously clogged. There's no one-way circulation. The middle part is blocked completely between the building and the circle. Cars have jumped up onto the landscape area that used to be protected by a fence, a post and chain fence. And you can see in the first set of photos, when Rusty Oxer was there was not what we've been seeing all along. So what you have is a chaotic, constantly in motion operation. And if we hold the cars back 30 feet or whatever from the curb, it's represented that sight lines could be provided adequately. The problem is, if you look at the pictures there, the trucks coming and going every day when they're dropping off or picking up vehicles, you can see they're doing it all wherever they can, which isn't much space because of all the parked cars. So in fact, that throat that comes out on the western curb cut for a large part of the time has cars and trucks loading, parked, and maneuvering. I've seen the trucks back across the post road to get in because there isn't the one-way loop that would otherwise have been represented to you. So if we work backwards to say that it's going to be on its property, complies with the zoning regulations, has a sidewalk, where on Valley Drive is absolutely critical. If you look at the aerial photos, or if you've been out there, you can see that there's a substantial sidewalk network along the south side of the post road. There's pedestrian signal crossings for all four corners where Valley Drive intersects, but there's no sidewalk here. So what happens is you can go across and you can come up, and as soon as you hit the first entrance, the sidewalk on Valley ends. You would then have to cross over to where, as you again can see in the photos, there's a sidewalk that runs past these office buildings all the way up to the post road, to the post office, and then also to where the last entrance to the office park is. So this is a very critical path. You can see this is where the trucks are sticking out, whether they're driving in or not, and there's a 30-foot gap here, and there are what appears to be employee trucks that are constantly parked in this area. So if anybody wanted to walk up this way, they would be in the street completely and would not have any protection. It also allows for complete visual access to the site, which is required by zoning to be screened for parking and storage areas. The staff report points out all the different types of planting that would be required. So I think we need to figure the number of spaces required. Say there's 20, show 20 real spaces, pick a number of tow trucks, not 4, 6, 8, or 10, and then see how it actually can work with the required landscaping. So I think that's what you need before you tell them to go to the Board of Appeals, because they'd be acting on a site plan.
Hold on just a second, Mr. Brown. So you have a non-conforming property that is looking to reduce the non-conformities. And we know where the state is on that. We're reducing the non-conformities. Now the question is the continuation of the use and the way it's being done. And a lot of what Mr. Brower has raised goes right into the ZBA lap, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's no grandfathering of illegal use. So what's grandfathered, let's say.
Is your non-conforming site.
Right, so if this got
Right.
rezoned to residential, let's just say, they would be permitted to continue their approved zoning board of appeals use. But if any illegal use doesn't go along
So
with that.
I think we're saying the same thing. The key then is where ZBA comes out on the use.
Exactly, right.
Whereas the site plan issues,
We're in a chicken and an egg, which is usually why we do preliminary.
Preliminary and ZBA and then back to final. We've done nothing for 4 months, so I don't see what's going, I mean, he's had the opportunity to.
because I was seeing the use issues as being much more critical. That's why I was trying to get it
Right.
into ZBA.
Well,
Because
I
to
don't-
me,
that's
the
where-
use issue is what's the question. The conditions that have been placed on this are from ZBA, so it's really I was seeing it as them being the critical piece of this. Once they make that call on the use and the legality of the use, then we can review the site plan, which we
I-
don't, by the way, we do have other versions other than what you're looking at there.
Yeah, but it's still not, if you look at your site
But-
plan checklist,
So
it's,
for an example, if the zoning board of appeals says no towing, and they say no
Exactly.
storage, I mean, that's gonna change the entire configuration of the property.
Exactly. So and we said this yesterday, the key is around this use issue. We're only doing the site plan if ZBA says,
No.
no, I think we're saying, we're repeating ourselves. So, yeah, it's a chicken and the egg, but we've got to know the parameters of the use before we can really finalize where
Right.
we go.
Well, that's where, as I said, saying because it's car-like doesn't mean it's ZBA. The only thing legally non-conforming as to this would be maybe that you only need five spaces per the 3 bays, which would make 15.
Right.
And that you couldn't count a truck in those spaces.
No,
And
which
he's,
they haven't here. They have not counted them here. They've got the 20 spaces, forget the removing of the 2. But the question is, what you heard the commission say is, we were more okay with we would prefer more landscaping and less reaching conformity on the parking. As long as they're not parking in anybody's right-of-way, which was represented has happened. So what you heard was the commission saying, if you're gonna address, the nonconformity of the site, the parking nonconformity is less important to us than the viewscape on the post road.
right, and safety and pedestrian circulation, and those are all
Yep.
site plan issues.
Carl,
But,
do you have a copy of their original approval?
Mhm.
The site plan that was approved with their,
well, they had 3, so in 69,
No, the most current is the one they count.
well, actually, it refers back to the prior ones. So the last one they had would have been 1984, addition to the rear. Um, and
is that in the package with the plans, right?
Yes. So at that point, they were requesting variances and side yards and coverage in order to allow the bump out on the back. Previously, the building was a rectangle. The first application was to extend from 2 to 3 bays to the right, and there was a repairs license, general repairs granted, and then there was the one to the rear. So that ZBA variance was specific to the addition to the back of the building, which required those
Right, right, right.
variances.
Wait, what page is that in your package?
5, over on the left,
5? And
on this, in the first package.
Well, he gave us 2 handouts.
Right, so the,
And which one? This one?
yes,
But where's the site plan now? You said you had a site plan for this approval?
yes.
This is page 5.
No, so 5, I thought he said what was the approval. So the approval, the last approval, was for the addition in the rear.
Is there a site plan associated?
There was a schematic, but it, except for the original application map that showed all the landscaping in the front yard, that they were going to make it so attractive, which is not there. That's really the only thing that was ever submitted. So let's just back up. They have 3 service bays that they're allowed to do. That, and the coverage as it relates to it is legally non-conforming. But this towing thing, again, this is really your choice. All they can do is motor vehicle sales and service. You do, they used to do, all other uses. And that was a catch-all, and if it wasn't spelled out, it went to them. This is a towing operation. It doesn't, I mean, it says it itself, what they do. They're across the country, state-of-the-art buses to motorcycles. You can see in those photos, they have these box trucks that are designed to move, transport exotic specialty vehicles. Those are not what you have in an automobile service station. So I think it's your obligation to come up with what you think is subordinate
We did.
or part of.
We did.
And using,
We've been together too long. Yeah, we
But
did.
we made it very clear to
Yeah.
that having 8 trucks and 1,000 calls is subordinate.
Say 8 trucks. We said that we saw the towing as part of the service. And again, we come back down to, it makes a lot of sense, because you're saying, how is this site being used?
Right.
So since you've got a service and you've got automotive, you're at ZBA. Let ZBA deal with the entire package, be able to look at it comprehensively, because otherwise you're splitting the uses on the site,
Mhm.
which makes it difficult for ZBA to be complete in their analysis. I mean, for a lot of reasons, it's logical to put it together, see it as one thing, and let ZBA go with it, because they know there's towing there.
Yes, and we
They know-
agreed that a
right.
service station would have towing.
Right.
The point is, this quandary was caused by the relatively recent amendment to Use Group 5, where everything was pulled out throughout the regulations from ZBA as special exception uses, and the only thing that left behind was that. So, this is the first time we're dealing with it.
Because it's statutory. Again, we need to check with the state, but from what the applicant has represented, and we'll double check it, it's part of automotive, and we're putting that back with ZBA.
So if we're going back to ZBA, then we need to know from a site plan point of view what requires variances and what doesn't. It's nice to have planting, but the regulation says under special permit that you have to have it unless it's
Now, you
screened
know
by
as
topography.
well as I do what's happened with nonconformities, nonconforming lots. So I want to see what the use is going to come back as. Then we can look at the site plan that works with that use. Directionally, they know what we would like to have happen. If they get approved by ZBA, what we want is something that is attractive from the street and that is more landscaped and doesn't have a ton of cars that are visible from all around and has greater safety. Now, ZBA's question, how about the uses? Then come back to us and let us go through a site plan that works with those uses.
So-
I think we're asking for something very logical.
But can't we do it preliminary ZBA final? We don't even know how many spaces are
Why
required
does it
and how
have
they're
to
going to
be
lay them out.
complicated?
Pardon me?
Why does it have to be complicated?
Because we have a
Bert,
very
we have the-
unworkable site.
We have the ability to leave it open and work the site plan when we know how the uses are. We've got time.
Well, there's going to be a lot of iterations because
We've got
the-
till the 12th of January.
Mhm.
Okay? I think we could work this out by the 12th of January.
Well, so long as you get a site plan, they get variances or whatever they need, and we actually have something that's legal and
Yes.
comprehensive.
Yes, but let's talk about what's happening on the property and whether or not ZBA is okay with that, whether the state backs us up on the fact, our research backs us up on whether towing and service should be considered automotive, both. And then let's get a site plan that works for those uses and works for the town. To me, that's just,
So what will they be going
does
to?
anybody have any issue with what we're
No,
where
but
we're going
I have
here?
a question for Mr. Brower.
Okay.
You've heard our discussion with the applicant about things we'd like to see on the site plan, the landscaping, DPW, dress them in the DPW things, the one-way traffic, that kind of thing. I'm at a loss to grasp of what your client is looking for.
That's a very good question.
Okay, so we're reducing
What
the
does
number of.
success look like?
We're reducing the number of cars, they're being numbered here. I have location to keep, to park the tow trucks. I'm adding an immense amount of landscaping, getting rid of that terrible rail in the back, no more sign, all kinds of interesting things. What is the issue that
Well-
we, or that,
Yes, so page 15 is a starting point. So those are, to me, to my client, and what should be the community's interest, is those are the minimum you need for safety. And unless we pinch down and have boulders someplace, it doesn't matter what you stripe, because it's going to turn out to be a fiasco. So that's why
You
sheet
didn't answer
15.
Mr. McRae's question.
I am, actually.
What's gonna make,
page 15 of what?
The second handout.
Stick your hand out.
what are you looking for in terms of success? What's
Okay.
success for you?
Like I said, start with page 15. That's showing you that you can have at least safe pedestrian circulation by incorporating significant screening along Valley, the backside of this operation, which,
We asked for that. Half an hour ago, Mr. Fox brought it up.
okay,
We've
but
asked
you're
for that.
making it sound like I didn't say what I wanted. This is what we're looking for.
Okay, so you're happy with
great.
what
So-
we've done so far?
I have
So
page,
far.
I have page 15.
Yes,
Does the applicant's representation have this as well?
I gave it to him tonight, yeah.
Okay. So now we're on the same page. This is what your client is looking for. Mr. Haslam has given us some thoughts on what his client can do. So there's got to be a happy medium here. Because it seems to me the client would like to maintain a business. Your client would actually like to maintain a business or have him have a business that looks nice on the street.
Yeah, we're on record as not objecting to having
Great.
tow trucks and having parked cars overnight. I told that to the Board of Appeals 5 months ago.
Okay,
What
so
we're
let's
frustrated.
go do this.
Finish that time. What?
Mr. Blackwell is right on the button of the work on my house. What is it that your client objects to, and what specifically?
Have we not done?
Okay, so then the last piece of the puzzle would just be, how do we, what happened to the 40 cars that were always there, and how will this work with 20?
So what are you frustrated about?
Well,
What is
just
your
that-
client frustrated
No,
about?
just that we're playing with a sketch after 4 months. That we could have been doing this with a real
So your
plan.
concern is the extra 20 cars? Just be specific. if
Yes.
you would,
Yeah.
About what it is that you, or what your client is most concerned about.
Okay.
What they're trying to solve.
The aesthetics, the safety, and in fact, that something that's being proposed can work. Because,
Great. Perfect. And
okay,
now, I think what we've been talking about is actually, we need to have the nuts and bolts of the use sorted out by ZBA. You agree to that, right?
I think it's yours, but that's your call.
Okay. Because to me, and what I'm hearing here is that if the ZBA comes back and says no towing, no service, something like that,
There you go.
like the town planner said, this could all change.
Exactly.
We
And
sort out the
chair
nuts
said
and
that.
bolts,
Yeah.
great. Then now we're gonna start working on the landscaping, the sidewalk, all of that other stuff. Because either one, I gotta have less parking for cars or more parking for towing trucks. I don't know yet.
Well, the way it's proposed on the colored drawing on page 15 is obviously a major change to the site plan because there's no longer the same amount of room for the tow trucks and those.
Exactly.
4 or 5 parking spaces there.
So the
So
balance
that-
here now
Which begs
is,
the question of why I wanna see that original site plan.
Okay. It doesn't have parking laid out on it. It has
Okay. It's
paved
just-
areas,
Gotcha, okay.
which have been expanded a little bit, but there was no parking layout. So there's ways, the dimensional deficiencies are in front of the building. The stuff over on the left are not affected by the sidewalk. So we disagree. You want it to go to ZBA, that's your choice, it goes to ZBA. We get to see a nice site plan, but hopefully ZBA or you can solve the mystery of how this is going to operate on a third of what it has been.
I don't have to solve that mystery, somebody else does, but I need to understand.
Well, the mystery is the
Which one
crux
is
of
it?
the safe operation of the site, so.
Okay. Okey dokey. Any other public comment? Mr. Hanson? Oh, Mr. Ferrari. You be the client. Hello.
Good evening. John Ferrari. I'm not used to being here opposing a project. Usually I'm
Well,
getting opposed.
it's good growth.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable, but I certainly don't feel comfortable trying to disrupt somebody from making a living. But I have to say for the record that I think the use is an improper use, okay? The majority of the business, I think it's an industrial use. I don't think it belongs on the post road. I think it's totally inappropriate. I think it's too intense. You know, when they talk about parking, most of their employees park on 500. This is
Okay.
taken last week of their employees parking at 500 despite repeat requests not to park there. You know, we've made a lot of improvements along the way on the west side, and with your help, a lot of them, and there's still a lot more to do. And I just hope the board, would take this opportunity to help clean up that area. So, thank you very much.
Mr. Ferrari, I actually appreciate your being here, and I think actually in our discussions with other applications and everything, and understanding that what we're looking at that side of town, I think we're all on the same page in terms of actually taking this particular site and making it better, and I think we're going in that right direction. I think the applicant understands that and has an opportunity to make it nicer, but at the same time keep the business. To me, when you're talking about a service station or a towing operation, it's got to be on the post road somewhere. I think that's the place for it to be. It could be a nicer site, but you wouldn't want to put it in a residential area. So I think we're on the same page, and we're all kind of focused in the
Yeah.
right direction. We just have to really get all those nuts and bolts out and figure it out.
But the
as
issue
we-
Mr. Ferrari is raising is that the employees for this business are parking on his property. And because there's not enough property, and he doesn't want
Do
them-
you know a good towing company where I can
Excuse me?
Do you know a good towing company where I can get them towed?
That would be
Hard to
pretty
do
funny. If you called. No, sorry.
Really, see, it's going to create problems, with parking on my site also.
Well, and
and-
especially because I do know that you've been talking to a certain planning and zoning commission about that very site, and you got harassed about not having enough parking on it. So we know that you may eventually need that parking yourself. So if that's an issue, and you've discussed that with the applicant.
My people have,
Yeah, okay,
but they've been,
okay. I'm hoping that you're being heard loud and clear. It does seem like they need to find an alternative that works.
thank you. Thank you.
But again, you open by saying the use. It really depends. I hope you go to the ZBA meeting, and you talk about the use, because what they decide about the use, then we come back and evaluate how the site plan works for that. That's how I see the chicken and the egg deciding itself, on this one anyway.
I understand.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else from the public? No. Mr. Haslam?
Thank you. I think we have direction. It's a shame Eric and I have a very good relationship. He mentioned the fact that
Well, you
it's been
did
4
say
months
no.
getting here. Pardon me?
Just
But I would have liked to have seen his proposal, because we could have incorporated, and actually I think we have, some of his ideas in my little sketch. His is more nicely colored than mine was, but I think we can adopt a lot of these. As I said, some of what's in the state land that may be a little more problematic, but we've come up with some suggestions how we might do more actually on our property rather than less. My client just briefly tells me that Mr. Ferrari's property manager lets them park some employees' cars on his property in exchange for not charging them for services like towing services. I'm not sure if Mr. Ferrari's aware of that
Okay,
or
so
not.
why don't you guys work this out?
We'll work that out.
Okay.
Right. And lastly,
Don't want to hear about it. You all work it out, talk nice to each other, and figure it out.
I just want to say one last thing, and that is if the ZBA ultimately decides that this is, doesn't fall under the automotive repair,
Got
that
it.
I may be coming back to the commission for a
Totally
special
get
permit.
that.
Good, thank
But
you. We're all on the same
Giving it a
page.
shot, and maybe we'll send something, once we have some research done, Patrick and Katie, maybe you could send a summary of that research to ZBA, so that ZBA is aware why we took the position we took, so that we can keep
Okay.
it logical.
Great, I think we're all
Okay.
heading in the same direction.
So we'll
hopefully.
leave this item open.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, for our next application, 28 Windrose Way LLC, for final coastal site plan and special coastal permit at 24 and 28 Windrose. Mr. Hegney.
Madam Chair, good evening to you and members of the Commission. For the record, Tom Hegney on behalf of the applicant. This is an application where we're looking to combine two parcels, a 2.6 acre parcel that you actually considered and approved a site plan for a 14,000 square foot house on its own, and combining it with a 2-acre parcel, which has a 5,400 square foot house on it together, and combining them together for a 4.6 acre parcel with one house that is 15,800 square feet. The plan as proposed is a 1-story house. It meets obviously height and stories, setbacks. The plan that you approved in 2015 had a 78.1% green space requirement, which met the requirement of the regulations of 78%. This current plan has a green space of 83.9%, so well in excess of what the regulations require. We've been to the health department, and they have approved a septic system for 5 bedrooms, which is what we have as part of this design, and incorporating in the green space and the greenhouse, and shed. We have had a site visit and walk with DEEP. And
I think the key here is you have had a chance to review Pat Sesto's comments from today.
I have.
So
Want me to just go through those?
I think we would like to hear.
I'm happy to do that. I guess my first thought was the wetland director forgot to take her hat off before she put her conservation hat on, because
Yes.
much of what is here is more of the wetland approach rather than a
really-
conservation
That may
approach.
be, but since we're talking title, she has every right to leave it on right now for conservation purposes. So let's not criticize how she approached it, and let's just look at her points.
Her first point was that there's still going to be extensive site grading and disturbance. As part of your approval for 28 Windrose, there was a significant amount of site disturbance. The house was torn down, the pool, indoor pool was removed, and there was a great deal of fill brought in to comply with the CLOMAR that was granted by FEMA.
Mr. Hagney, just
And that
real-
work has been done.
Real quick, what year was that?
2015.
Okay.
Okay, so actually what we're really asking you,
Just to describe the changes to site coverage, we're having more lawn area than exists now. We're having less coverage than exists now.
yeah, but if you look at her comments, she's looking for less lawn area.
The lawn area is being reduced from 169,440 square feet to 109,810 square feet.
Okay, so
Yeah, as far as the setback from, and the buffer area, that's very much in the purview of the state DEP. And the plan that we have for you,
well, the state is, okay, then the state wants it to be,
the plan that we have before you, first of all, there's a great deal of erosion that is occurring here. And
Yeah.
that's why we walked the whole coastline with DEP. We were first looking to retain many of those trees and create a riprap or a revetment along the coastline. That's not something that DEP wants. They said, we want you to remove those trees, many of which are in jeopardy of falling into the sound, and we want you to landscape this with native grasses that are salt tolerant. We have also enhanced that by providing buffer plantings, which are also salt tolerant, that are a native shrubbery, and we're bringing back and putting in additional trees farther back from the shoreline. There's also this green band here, which is also a native grass planting that goes about 2 feet high to separate the upper lawn from the area adjacent to the coastline. That's what was reviewed by the DEP. You received a no comment from John Goucher because this is what the state was looking for us to do to protect the coastline and enhance the habitat along the coastline. In terms of the fill, this site had, and essentially the property line is here. This has already been extensively filled. That's what's there now. We're looking to bring the grade up around here so that the house will be out of the AE zone and in the X zone. That's what the modified Clomar for this would involve. The rain gardens are located in 4 places. They're all about the same elevation. They all started about elevation 13. The bottom is about elevation 11 and a half. It would have to be 100 or 50 or 100-year storm to have any impact on those. And of course, my client will sign a maintenance agreement for those to be maintained, whether they're impacted or not. But the likelihood of them being impacted is very remote. And there was a comment on where the
Can you tell me,
drain, where the storage areas should be.
you go back, boop, go back. The driveway, when you come in off of the circle,
Right.
and you go
Right
left
here.
and you make that hairpin curve? No, the other
Oh,
one.
this,
And you make the
coming in
hairpin
like
curve?
this. Serpentine.
Okay. Is that for topography or for
No,
decorative?
Janice, do you want to, Janice Parker's our landscape architect, and I
had a
think she
feeling that
can
you might be-
provide some elucidation on this.
Hello, everybody. Janice Parker, landscape architect. How are you? So there is a 5-foot grade change. So a straight shot up would have been more closer to 12% grade, and this is, we've kept a light grade all the way up. And also there is a desire by the design team for there to be a bit of a longer approach and to be able to see the house as you arrived. And that's really the situation. We fall way within, having enough green space. So, this was a design desire by the
It would
client.
just, I mean, A, it's more impervious, but B, it would drive me nuts.
Understand.
I mean, I would just want to get to my house,
Mhm.
but it's also more impervious than you need to have. So that's why I was asking, doesn't really, and the same thing on the left, when you're going into the parking lot.
Over here,
Yeah?
it's going on an existing drive to
So you're
this, to
keeping
this.
the old impervious.
Yes.
But you don't have to, you could just, again, it just weird not to have them be straight shots, but,
I understand.
I mean, it's just, why are you making more impervious than you need to?
Well, we're well within the regulations, and it's a request of the client and the design team.
It's just, okay, if the client wants it, okay, it's just, I don't understand why the design is purposely, so fine, you meet the regulations, but you could still have less impervious.
Well, by taking this longer trip as well, and you can see it on the planting plan, it's going through a very densely, newly planted area. And if you've been to the site, you can see how really derelict the site has become, and the trees there are in very bad shape. So this is all going to be planted with new maples and sycamores and underplanted with ferns and other ornamentals, and it's a high meadow throughout the whole area. So it's actually a very robust arrival of having a different experience from coming down the road.
So you are gonna do meadow all into there?
Yes, we have, it's actually, I do think I should point out that this client with the greenhouse and the organic gardens has existing organic production gardens and is very serious about wanting to produce healthy produce. That was good, 2 words more. So there will be no chemical use, and of course they'll sign that agreement. But the goal through this whole area is it's an apple orchard, it's vegetables, it's herbs, and it's for sitting out and enjoying themselves. This isn't really, you know, about going into a garage. The garage is over here at the house. Okay, so this is actually sort of the farm part of the property, and for outdoor living as well. So there is a need to bring service vehicles in and out, and they obviously are going to do better on asphalt than they're going to do on a solid gravel driveway. It is all very densely planted. There were a couple of things that happened. With the original survey, we did a lot of our preliminary work, and it looked like we were taking out 136 trees. When the new
Down to
104, the new survey came in, we went out and field checked it, and a lot of the trees were already been removed by the previous owner. So, you know, that's reduced. When we put in the first landscape plan, which showed 185 trees, that plan was a minimal landscape plan. We're still in SD, in schematic design with the client, and we didn't show the ornamental part of the landscape because it wasn't solidified. It is now. If it, you know, there are 236 trees, and it wasn't sort of pumped up for this occasion. It's because this is the ornamental plan that they're wanting and putting in. The ornamentals are native plants, and they are going to withstand these environments. We have ones that don't have as much salt tolerance to the front, and the more salt tolerant in the back. The buffer planting is very, very large. It's 9,200 square feet, and there's none now.
And would they consider doing?
Absolutely none.
Would they consider doing a deeper buffer? I mean,
You know, I don't know if that's what the neighborhood wants, because there isn't one down there. And it's very important that people along this road
No,
can
we don't
still
want-
see the water.
Oh, yeah,
And
we
we've
know
had
that.
discussions this morning about that with
No.
the neighbors.
yeah, no,
So,
we just
you
did
know,
we just did one where the buffer planting, the title's area planting was low. We asked that it be low so that you weren't
Mhm.
depriving people of the view, but at the same time, to try to get a greater respect for
Well,
the
it's
title
all the
area.
way around the entire site.
No.
And it also is a secondary buffer here.
Yeah,
It's
we were
much far,
concerned with the
very
title.
far past, if you go over here, the 10 feet that was requested by DEEP. And I think that it's actually very sizable. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
I
a
mean,
large
you're
property.
considering the DEP really wants 100 feet and always has, and we can't do 100 feet in most of our properties in Greenwich. I
Mhm.
mean, we know we can't, but that's why we asked if you could do more than 10.
So we have 19,400 square feet of buffer plantings. There are 9,200 along the coastline. It is continuous cover of native grasses, herbaceous, 71 native shrubs, 44 native trees, all through this buffer. It's robust. It's almost 20,000 square feet.
It's 10 feet.
No, that's what was along the coast is the 9,200, and then there's
It's 10
additional.
feet. Yeah, it's 10 feet deep, the title.
Our
Anyway, the
buffer is
question is,
coming,
would
yeah, so our
you,
buffer is the color that's coming up into the lawn, what was previously lawn.
would your client consider doing more? That was the question. 'Cause,
I
you've
certainly
got
can
some
ask
open-
them.
You can certainly
You-
ask them, because you've got a
I'd let
couple
Tom
of other
answer that.
items. You've got, look, in all honesty, we got this today, okay?
Mhm.
When I got this new landscape plan this afternoon, we were in meetings all afternoon, I wrote staff back and said, somebody say something about this, because we're not gonna have a chance to study it before the meeting. So, right now, we've told you over, and it's very hard. We get stuff at the last minute.
I understand.
That's a huge change. So you've got some open stuff, because you do have the resubmit from DPW. We were okay with the Clomar being conditional, as you heard yesterday, or I think you were there yesterday.
And
But-
that is what you did with the plan in 2015
Right.
for the other
Yep,
house.
I recall that. But
What's-
we're
what's
not
the
okay,
status of it?
hold on. We're not okay with, we'd like you to do the easement stuff and the homeowners association stuff.
We do not need to do that. I've
Well,
tried
then
to
you
explain
resolve
that to them.
No,
We have the right, under the deed, and why don't I just read that language to you? Because, yeah, it's hard when you have engineers trying to practice law.
No, Mr.
Um,
Hegney, don't do
And
this.
it says, in terms of drainage or any other utilities, it says any such facility may be relocated within their own land and at their own expense by the owners of that land crossed by any such facility, provided all work in such relocation shall be done in a prompt and workmanlike manner. There is no need to have any additional approvals. This is the language in my client's deed.
Yeah, you're
They have the right to do it.
You're doing, you're relocating the stormwater drain into the area that's owned by the Windrose Way Association?
No.
That's what he's got here, so why don't you just make that clear to him?
Well, I had sent that to them, and
Okay, well, you are not, if you aren't relocating it, what he thinks here is that you're relocating.
we're relocating it from here to here.
On
And
Windrose Way.
it's all within my client's property.
So you should just show that to Mr. Marucci. The Clomar, as you know, the condition would be fine. That's where I come out. I would like you to resolve these issues with DPW. Commissioners, any comment?
What's the status of the Clover?
It's pending. I looked to see, we filed one on another property at the beginning of August, and it was granted yesterday. So
Okay, so
it's not like it's going to take a year.
Okay. The status of the Clomar, just to, where we are with the timing of that.
Mr. Hardman, did you want to?
No, I just asked Nick to repeat this question.
Mr. Lowe?
I'll get back to the public because I'm not clear on this. They were thrown out about
19,000, actually.
The issue was, desire is to have it be 100 feet, right?
Yeah, but Deep, if you look at the letter here, Deep agreed to the 10 feet, but the state wants 100, but we can't do 100 in Greenwich because the properties aren't deep enough.
But
Deep
deep is the state.
That's what I said.
Yeah, but they said 10 was okay.
Statutorily- Yeah, I just said that, Mr. Hegney. I didn't?
No.
Okay.
You
What I said
the
was,
they
the
said
state
10
normally
on
wants 100, but they've okayed 10 here. Is that a better way of saying it for everybody? The state normally wants 100, but they walked the property and have okayed 10. I was looking to see if there was wiggle room.
And what Janice Parker was saying was that we are expanding it in many areas beyond the 10. And it's not just grasses, it's also bushes and shrubs.
It would be helpful if those distances were highlighted on the plan versus
Certainly.
the commissioners taking a swag at scaling the drawing and put it into relationship with the property.
We can certainly do that.
Now, the comments from engineering.
Yep.
It's a resubmit prior to final. Then he quantifies it by saying that comments 7, A, B, C, and D are the reason for requesting a resubmittal for final site. And if acceptable to the commission and staff, engineering is acceptable to reviewing the revisions prior to zoning building permit. When I'm looking at 7, A, B, C, and D, it seems that it's actually very nuts and bolts of the drainage system.
Right.
And I don't see why, as per the recommendation from engineering, that this be just subject to, prior to his zoning permit. He's gonna have to resolve this to
Well, they've
Mr.
also-
Marucci's satisfaction prior to staff signing off on this.
It's also, they've just changed the grading with the new landscape plan. You have
No.
different grading.
No, the grading doesn't change at all.
Okay.
It's only just the landscaping, and it's really augmenting the landscaping, not changing the grading or what's there.
This is me trying to read this
And
quickly.
Mr.
One
Hegney,
second.
Can Derek
the
address
drainage
those issues?
easement that's there, that's shown on the A2, that's basically, it's catch basin out of the cul-de-sac of Windrose, correct? The drainage easement that runs, like I said, out to the water.
Good evening. Derek Donay from Rocco DeAndrea Incorporated, civil engineer.
It's the same, the new construction is the same catch basin, just going in a different direction.
No, it's a different catch basin. That catch basin then goes to a manhole, only due to the location of where it's going to be going. So that, it'll go from that catch basin in the street to a manhole on their property within the easement, and then out towards Long Island Sound.
Okay.
And in regards to Mr. Marucci's comments here, I've reviewed them. He's asking for a little bit more detail. These are not major issues. I have no problem responding to these, submitting to him. They're not something that's going to change the concept of the project or anything like that. On my end, if I know he put it in your lap, if you would be acceptable to move it to zoning permit, building permit, I have no problem with his comments and responding to those at that time.
And you, as the engineer and surveyor, you'll represent that this drainage line is 100% on the applicant's property?
Yes. Yeah.
Do we want that as part of or do we want something for? Well, I just want to make sure, well, we're covered actually, that the Windrose Way Association's comfortable. Do we have something, or are you going to
Well,
supply
I
something that
suppose
actually
Mr.
says?
Burke could comment on that. I just wanted to say, we met with the neighbors on either side
Yes.
this morning. We walked the site. There were a couple of concerns that we went over. Currently, we're showing a generator. It meets the setbacks, but it's located right here. And Mr. and Mrs. Burke said, is there another place it can be located? Now that the plans are being developed more, the electrical service is probably going to come into here. So it makes a lot more sense to have it over in this location where the electrical service is going to be entering the house. So I told Mr. Burke, and said I would represent that at the hearing this evening, is we will locate it in the area of the greenhouse and shed, again, meeting setbacks. The other issue was we're proposing a deer fence that comes along here and then ties back into the house. We don't have anything along here. The landscaping is intended to grow into the deer fence, but you still have the poles as part of that. And Mr. and Mrs. Burke asked if that could be 7 feet high rather than 8 feet high, and we said, yes, we can make those 7 feet high, and I said I would represent that as a modification this evening. We also met with the neighbor on the other side. He had an issue with some ponding that's occurring now that's probably as part of all of the fill that was brought in here as part of addressing the Clomar a few years ago. And Derek went over the drainage with him, and he was satisfied that
How about if
this
we-
is acceptable.
If we just take a break and let the public, the neighbor speak for himself, were you okay with taking a quick stop? And
I serve at your pleasure.
thank you. I wouldn't have said that earlier. Okay. Mr. Burke? And you'll have to, when you get to the mic, you have to give your name and spell it for the court reporter.
Sure thing. So,
Oh, because the whole thing.
hi, Duncan Burke. It's D-U-N-C-A-N-B-U-R-K-E. I'm at 22 Windrose Way. Property is in the name of my wife, Nancy Burke. And we had Eric Charawira with us this morning also. He's a neighbor on the other side. For, I think, about 2 months now, it's possibly 2 months, we've had layers of plans, engineering plans, planting plans, architectural plans, and we've been interested, very interested, of course, because we live there, about having I think it's a wonderful project next door to us. It's wonderful, and I can say that the concerns that we had this morning, my wife with the generator and which is moving from here to there, and we're very interested in our sight lines, you know, and the height of the first floor in the house is 15 feet. The prior house was 14 feet. The highest level of the new house is it 32 feet? 32 feet. We have a height restriction on Windrose Way that's well within. Most houses have 2 floors on the waterfront there. This is 1 floor. So it's connected spaces that will range away from where we are. We're over here. The new house actually angles away from us. The old house started here and went more like this. And the new house angles away from us, which is very pleasant, actually. The old driveway was here. Now it winds around into this section, so it'll be attractively looping around with lots of marvelous sounding planning. I mean, I sound like a commercial for, but I honestly feel this way. We're excited about the way it's going to be. We love our views this way, and we could see through the trees. So the 10-foot setback here is very much pleasing to us as opposed to something different. And also, some of the trees here that are excessive and old and ratty
Yeah,
are
we would not,
coming away, but the big trees on the waterfront, the major ones, will still be there,
right.
all approved by DEEP. And then in terms of our waterfront there and flood zones with Sandy or any other storm, it's never come over our 12-foot seawall at our own house. This could be a little higher here than our 12 feet, but in terms of this area out there, I think it's going to be well situated versus anything we've seen in recent, you know, I've been in there for 20 years, so we're very pleased with the project, with the team. Every contact has been first rate, and we're actually quite excited about it. So it could be 2 houses on a property with multiple floors, and you know, children coming and going and all that kind of stuff. And
one thing that they did mention, so that you aren't surprised, because they've been open about it, is that they are going to have some commercial vehicles entering and exiting always because of the greenhouse. Will you mention that? You said because of the greenhouse and the farming, and you said for an asphalt, for the commercial vehicles, an asphalt access is better, you said. Somebody just said that.
Perhaps I could, they may be trucks that are coming in. This is going to be just the family doing this.
Well,
There's no
trucks are
commercial
your-
operation going on.
Trucks are commercial vehicles. in
You
my
know,
mind.
you know, so is the UPS truck and
Yeah,
FedEx
it's a
and all
commercial
those.
vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're gonna have, ma'am, you can't speak from your seat, because, ma'am, this is a public hearing and it's being recorded, you can't speak from your seat. Okay, so, they are gonna have trucks that are not buying produce, but you are gonna see some trucks because they're gonna have a greenhouse and they're gonna have deliveries in and out of the greenhouse. And you're good with that? I mean, just don't be surprised, because
I
they've been
mean,
very
this,
open about it.
this wasn't mentioned to me, but it doesn't sound like anything disturbing because
Okay.
we all have 2 or 3 FedEx
Yeah.
trucks, and the mail truck comes into the
Just-
driveway most
They're
days.
being open about it, they're
Yeah,
saying they've
well.
got this greenhouse, they wanna have their own produce,
Yeah.
and they're gonna need some support for that, and so when you see those vehicles, we're cognizant of that.
Well, it looks to me like they'll go into the side driveway there and go into the back and turn
Yes,
around in there
that's
and come back out.
Exactly why I asked the
Yeah,
question.
so I don't think that would be,
Okay.
that wouldn't be a
Okay,
concern. We
you're
all have a
comfortable.
lot of, deliveries.
Live by those words.
Yeah,
Okay?
okay.
Thanks, Duncan.
I think if, it would be good to know the volume that's anticipated, because it was made mention, the only reason I'm raising it is because it was made mention that asphalt driveway would be better there because of the trucks that are going to be coming in and out is more comfortable for them. Do you have any idea what kind of volume that truck?
Nope.
Yes. Now you
maybe
can come on up and talk to us.
Janice can answer that.
I apologize for saying that.
Oh,
The
it's
asp-
good you said it, because we were able to make sure that the neighbor was aware that, you
But
know,
it's not the case. I mean, this, at the most, is the same as when someone comes in to mow the lawn. That's it. They're not producing anything that's gonna be bottled or canned or sold.
No, I understood
You
that.
know, so everybody has the same exact kind of lawn crew that comes into their house.
But not a greenhouse, and you said they were growing their own produce and that it was
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable for the trucks to have.
Well, you certainly don't
Small
want
driveway.
anybody who comes in, all the people who maintain lawns come in with a flatbed, they take the mowers off it. That's how it works.
A lot of
And
people
when they
don't-
come in on a gravel driveway, it makes a terrible mess. So I wouldn't call, I mean, it's
Ma'am,
typical
a lot of
landscape
people don't
contracts.
have asphalt for their landscapers. I don't know why you're arguing this point. You're the one who said it, I'm just repeating it.
I've actually rarely seen, I've seen penetration coat on top of asphalt, but I've rarely seen just gravel driveways in any of the estates I've worked on in Greenwich.
Okay, well,
Because when it comes to
Miss-
winter time and basically
ma'am,
getting
you're
traction.
the one who said it, not me.
Right, so I'm taking, I'm
Taking it
explaining it.
back.
No, I'm just explaining it.
Okay,
I'm explaining
we
it.
gotcha.
We have the asphalt, we do not have solid gravel, and it will simply be the normal landscaper trucks that will come into the property
Okay.
for maintenance.
That's what we call it this
Mr. Hegney, just a suggestion. As we've heard tonight, the landscape plans and schematic design. Just a suggestion is that the landscape plan be coordinated with what's happening on the drainage plan. It seems that there's a lot of things that are being planted on top of drainage structures, that kind of stuff. I'm gonna make sure that actually there's no interference, that kind of thing.
There has been a good deal of discussion between the engineer and the landscape architect, particularly with relocating the drainage pipe off
Drainage
of the
pipe.
end of the road to make sure that you protect and preserve the trees that you're looking to protect and preserve, and that the new plants you're putting in aren't going to impact
It's a
it.
big pipe that's going in there, and there's actually, you've got galleries over at where the orchard is supposed to be, you know, that kind of thing, so.
So,
I think it's something that the DeAndrea staff and the landscape architect work together to make sure that actually you're not planting on top of something that's.
Certainly.
So two questions. Does anybody on the commission want to raise anything else at this time? Do we think, but before we do that, do we have any other members of the public who want to speak? Okay, anybody on the, I'm sorry, sir, you've got to come to the mic because the meetings are
The
recorded.
driveway surfaces are going to be asphalt.
Yes, it's asphalt. Because, yeah, they're asphalt. Anybody else, questions? So, we've got nobody else from the public. What are your inclinations on this application, folks? Do you want to wait for the DPW issues to get resolved? Do you need time to look at the landscape plan? What do you want to do? Because DPW has kind of left it to us. Dennis? Nick?
I'm fine, we can, I think the DPW issues can be sorted out during the zoning permit phase.
Okay. Dave? Okay, all right. So we will close this item unless you want to make any further comments.
Thank you.
It's actually two applications, right? Yeah, it's two applications, so we're closing both of them, because you have the site plan and you also have the merger. We never talked about your property merger.
I guess that was the first thing I said, that we
Yeah,
were
you're merging
consolidating the
yeah,
two
so-
parcels together, yes.
You
But
know,
we
we're
would
gonna
like you to
condition-
approve
so when
that
we
as
move
well.
We'll do the merger, when we make a decision, we'll do the merger first, then we'll do the site plan, and on the merger, you'll have all the usual conditions that you file it and all that.
Great,
Okay.
thank
All
you.
right, thank you, so it's closed. Our next application is the estate of Vincent Camuto at 11 Chateau Ridge Drive for a final resub to modify conditions on the original subdivision. Hello, Mr. Tessie.
Hello, Chairman Alden, members of the commission.
No, this is new. This one we haven't seen for a while.
Yes, 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
This application was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, I believe, in July of 1999. I guess I was there. And it was a fairly controversial application at the time. Some people may want to revisit the past, but the bottom line was the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the application. Inland Wetlands Watercourses Agency approved the subdivision at the time. And all of the lots, which there are essentially 3 lots, A, B, and C on the board. There's a third lot, parcel X, was to be added to another lot, lot number 3 in the Chateau Ridge Association as excess land. No development in these 20 years had taken place at all. Mr. Camuto passed away a few years ago, and his widow owns the property basically through the estate of Mr. Camuto. And the property is essentially on the market, has been on the market. When I say the property, I mean all of the land. And as indicated in Mr. Bristol's letter to you, our client has been working very closely with one party who's interested in purchasing one of the lots. Would have been nice for everyone if we found someone to buy it all, but we have one particular lot. And there's no intention here to at all derogate or diminish the importance of preserving the areas within the conservation easement area. They're not proposed to be changed at all. What simply is being asked is to have these lots individually reviewed at the time of development or proposed development, and install the, on the one hand, install the demarcation features along the perimeter. The area that's shaded on the 3 lots, which I highlighted with a red marker, constitute the conservation easement areas. Each of these lots will need Inland Wetland Watercourse Agency permits. As noted in the staff report and the Conservation Director's comments or Department's comments, the review process, as you know, and it's just witnessed in the previous application, is a lot more, I'll use the word robust, today than it was in 1999. And that goes across the board from zoning, conservation, and inland wetlands watercourses. And of course also DPW, I'll add that too in terms of the drainage requirements. So we have a lot of inherent provisions for both safety and environment built into the regulatory process today. What we would be doing is letting you ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. There's something I forgot to ask yesterday. There are 2 letters, 2 decision letters in '99.
Yeah. One denial, one approval.
So in this letter, the first one, Mrs. Fox says that the demarcation can be either with the wall or the boulders. That means that back then, they felt that the boulders would meet the purpose, even though at the time they were apparently asking for the walls.
The boulders was an accepted demarcation feature at the time, as they are today. It kind of morphed into this situation
because of the issues
of various issues of installing the wall, and not only installing the wall on a particular lot that was proposed to be developed, but also not allowing that really development to take place until all the walls were put in around the perimeter of all of the conservation areas on literally the four parcels. That's A, B, C, and X, which we point out is onerous to say the least, and it's really a showstopper for being able to sell the first lot.
So,
Go ahead.
so back to the boulders.
Yes.
So the conservation comments is if you did them 15 feet on center, that
Well,
they would,
let me
that
say-
would be, if you didn't do walls and you did the boulders as they're suggesting,
Yeah.
they would be satisfied with that as meeting the point, the purpose of the
Yeah,
conservation.
I think that, well, let me
So
say
if-
this. The Wetlands Agency, you know, I use the word robust, and I think that's a fair word, is very tuned into protecting the areas. As you can see, the areas we're really talking about are wetlands in a buffer area beyond the wetlands. The wetland, let me say this, the Wetlands Agency has to make its own decisions. It
Let
could
me- let me
easily
start.
decide.
Let me start that again.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what she says
Right.
is if the demarcation issue needs to be resolved, the one that you have from 99,
Right.
that you don't want to do walls anymore and you want to do boulders, that if you do the boulders 15 feet on center, that meets what conservation wants. So the first change to the condition of your subdivision, conservation supports doing the boulders 15 feet on center.
Right.
Okay. So you should be good there because that's really who we wanted to hear from. We know you've got to go to wetlands and do the wetlands thing. And you're also going to have to figure out, because septic, they don't have the file, but.
Well, septic
but
would have to be redone anyway.
You've gotta
The
redo it.
files are too old, the
Right, right.
regulations
They
have
can't-
changed,
They can't find the file?
drainage is
apparently?
different, so.
Okay, they can't find the
Yeah,
file
no,
apparently?
I know that.
But it must have been submitted or you wouldn't have gotten
Oh,
this.
yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
you've got to do all the wetlands and septic and all that, but bottom line, conservation's okay with you not doing the walls.
Right.
You can do the boulders as long as they're 15 foot on center
Right,
apart,
right.
which is apparently not how you laid it out. I don't scale stuff, so, did you scale it?
No, I
Okay.
in fact, actually,
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in this same briefing package that we have, it is acceptable even back then, and I think it's in one of Diane's letters, that as long as the open space is owned by either,
That's what the regulations provide.
even back then in 99.
Association of
But even in
owners.
99, I'm going back to 99,
Or you
there's
can
a.
go back even farther if you want
But
to.
in 99,
Yeah.
she says either a not-for-profit or the homeowners association is acceptable. What I think the conclusion of that is, both of the conditions that you would like to have changed in this subdivision have support from conservation, from a conservation and subdivision regulations.
Intrinsically in the regulations.
Exactly.
The only
So-
other clarity point, and I'm only interrupting you so I don't forget, is that
Oh, that was a good way of doing that. I'm
Yeah, it's
gonna
kinda
remember that.
tricky.
I'm gonna do that when I
Corollary,
interrupt
but
people.
it's
I'm gonna
actually
tell them that,
true.
but now he's gonna forget.
corollary, no, you almost did that, I forgot, it's to tell
Okay,
you no
good, go
joke,
ahead.
but we're getting late. But corollary, I got the word out right, as to one is that the requirement with respect to those demarcation features would be on a lot-by-lot development basis, and not a universal requirement. Sorry?
Why not just do it across?
Because it's just too much, and some of this may never, because there's a real economic problem in doing that. Across the board is, let me give you an example, lot number one.
while you're wrestling with that, I
Important to
think
us.
actually the issue would be if
This is-
one lot gets developed, but the others do not, it's going to be reviewed by wetlands anyway.
That's my point. Wetlands is going to develop, nothing gets developed unless that's put in, but on a lot-by-lot basis. If we look at Lot C, it has a relatively small amount of area that needs to be properly demarked, if that's the word. And B and A, or you're talking about all of this here, all around this coming over here. It is,
Okay, done.
I mean, from a
Technically, it's
logical
open space
point
right
of
now.
view, you want to put them in.
at that time it's
you
developed,
start
that's the
site.
point I was gonna get up to. You actually will have to engage disturbance. And the truth of the matter is, we don't know what wetlands may say, and I'll give you a good example. Wetlands may say, you know what, we would like you to go back another 15, we don't care what happened conservation. We may want you to come up giving Kerr Wetlands to move them here. So if we put them in, they may tell us to move them farther away. Thank you.
No, I don't want you driving on the site until you're ready to.
Yeah, but the point is truly, we can't
How
have
would you-
that feature established until Wetlands agrees, because they may ask
Okay.
for more.
How would
Not
you-
less. I assure you they won't ask for less.
How would you like to take a deep breath and let me ask if any members of the public have anything to say?
Certainly.
Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment on this application? Sure.
Good evening. My name is Volker Banneman.
Just spell that.
Spells, yeah, Volker. And the last name is Banneman, Bahnemann. Good evening. I was unfortunately part of this very sorry situation from the very beginning. And to consider this to have been controversial is an understatement.
Yeah, that, we gathered that because they gave us all the background. It was just,
So fundamentally, this re-subdivision is sought, I would assume, for commercial reasons.
well, they're asking us just to change 3 conditions on it. And,
But the ultimate objective of Mrs. Camuto is an economic one, obviously.
Right.
To market it better. To just put it back in perspective, this sale of the original Boy Scouts land was a disaster. It was a clandestine operation, and the price should still make Mrs. Camuto very happy. They bought 21 acres for $1.7 million. So, in my opinion, to now seek a re-subdivision for economic reasons is totally unacceptable.
they're not changing the lots, sir. They're only changing how the open space, the conservation area, what marks it out. And they're asking, instead of having walls, to have boulders. And that-
Also, sorry for interrupting,
Yeah.
also an economic
Yeah,
trade-off.
But
Right.
both were approved
both are allowed.
at the original approval.
And one is more expensive, and what conservation has said here is, and we'll add this, that they're okay with using boulders, and this is the conservation department, in combination with some segments of lower stone walls. And so we'll condition that it has to be reviewed, that as each lot gets marked, it would have to be reviewed with the conservation department to meet their purposes. The reason that they don't like the stone walls as much is because they limit the movement of some of the animals that you want in the open space, and they're trying to have the animals be able to move around. That's what the conservation people have said. So you're not changing the subdivision, you're only changing how the open space is marked.
Okay.
And who owns the open space. And whether it's the folks that have the land here, or whether it's the Greenwich Land Trust, we accept both. And in fact, the more common is for a homeowners association to own their open space. Can I promise you that it will not be invaded? No, but that's your job. Neighbors usually tell
Sure.
us when something is wrong with the open space, and all you have to do, if you like your iPhone, you can report it in through an app. But you can tell us if the open space is being violated, if it's not being protected over time. But they're not re-subdividing.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
Why
sir.
is it called an application for a re-subdivision?
Because they are amending the conditions of the subdivision, but what they're changing.
So there are no new plot lines, there's
No,
no...
sir. No, sir. No new plot lines. Go ahead,
And
Katie.
The reason why is we only have 2 application types. We only have 2 options. One is a subdivision and one is a re-subdivision, so it's very clunky.
Oh, okay.
So even if you were merging land and consolidating land, it would still be called a re-subdivision.
And to give you,
So
it's
agreed, it is
tough.
clunky, but it's the only,
And to give you an example, when you combine 2 lots, you're in this sticky point because that's not a re-subdivision
Mhm.
when you're combining 2 lots.
Mhm.
So we probably, but one day we'll change that so it makes more sense, but we're very focused on protecting, I don't know if you were here for a while earlier, we're very focused on
Yes.
protecting the open space. We were trying to get people to plant more
No, I appreciate you.
native grasses and stuff. But neighbors keep an eye on each other that they protect the open space. That's your job.
And we will continue to keep an eye on it. Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you, Mr.
explanation.
Weidemeyer.
Okay?
Ma'am. And you know the drill. You gotta say your name and all that.
Yes, good evening. It's Dawn Guerrero, it's Guerriero. A number of the homeowners on Chateau Ridge is a little concerned about putting this land that's supposedly protected into a homeowners association. Where does that, we have sort of a rather loose homeowners association. Where does the responsibility, if there's a violation, if there's a problem, from a financial standpoint, who takes on that responsibility? If you're taking it out of the hands of a
wanna answer that?
nonprofit, and let's say there is something, when this building, commences and whoever buys it or builds or whatever, who has that
I'm
responsibility?
gonna let Katie answer that because the enforcement people report to her, so she's gonna answer that for you.
Well, it's a very serious issue because these open space areas are deed restricted. So whether it's a land trust or a homeowners association, they have to enforce and comply with the letter of that declaration. So it can't be loose, it can't be, it has to be very specific and it has to follow what's in there, whether it's a land trust or someone else. And we do have many of that, many homeowners association for exact situations like this throughout town. So this is not unusual at all. And conversely, we have a lot of land trusts, but to us, it doesn't really matter because it's the responsibility of whatever party owns that area to follow out what is specified in the Declaration of Restrictions for the open space.
But right now, that open space is protected by the Greenwich Land Trust, is that correct?
No, it's not.
Who's in charge of it then? Because that's there was confusion as to the statement where it says remove it from a nonprofit and give it to a homeowner. So then who therefore is now in charge of it if it's not the nonprofit?
They're allowed either. There are some areas that have the homeowners association are the deeded owners of that parcel, or a land trust or some similar non-for-profit. It's just the entity that owns the open space.
But do we know who owns this open space? Because the entrance to the street is owned by the Greenwich Land Trust, because that was part of, apparently, many years before we arrived. But that was part of the original subdivision, and the Greenwich Land Trust maintains, for example, we had a sick tree. They came and took care of it because it's on their property. We can't touch it. There's a little sign that's planted by the lake and so forth. So the way this is stated led us on the street to understand that this bit of land was protected in the same fashion. But you're now indicating that it's quite confusing.
I believe there's one owner now of the property, and if there were to become two owners, meaning one of one parcel and one of the other three parcels, they now in common would have to create a homeowners association that they would have to oversee the open space in conformance with the declaration. So the way the condition was originally proposed was that when one parcel was sold off or a house was built or something along those lines, that it would go to the land trust. And so now they're asking for that not to happen and for a homeowners association to be formed.
Okay.
Katie, is it true that open space remains under the ownership of the Camuto?
Well, let's ask the applicant to clarify this.
Okay, a few things. One is that the land we're talking about is actually an easement area. It's not owned in fee. So we're talking about the overlay of the conservation easement. So part of the area, the open space area, is located within each parcel, in varying degrees, the shaded area. So this is an easement, a conservation easement. The declaration of conservation easement's been filed in the land records, and the declaration contains a lot of the language we have today in the regulations. But first of all, the estate of Mr. Camuto is the responsible party to maintain those areas at this time consistent with the declaration of, basically a declaration of restrictions, also known as the conservation easement here. So the responsibility now is with respect to this property with the estate of Camuto. What's specifically provided, again, typical in our historical language in the Declaration of Restrictions, is upon the first sale to a third party of any one of the parcels, at that particular time, there has to be a conveyance of the easement away from the property owner to how it reads now in the declaration, a not-for-profit 501c3 entity that has as its primary purpose the preservation of land, such as the Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, Audubon. In our regulations, and more typical in our declarations, we provide either the homeowners association or that third-party entity. And the biggest issue we have here with the Audubon and Land Trust in terms of their reluctance to get involved, I think part of it is the controversy in the history. They tend to want to stay away from even 20-year-old controversies, but also the affirmative obligation of maintenance. Now, what you were referring to, you're correct, you live on Chateau Ridge, right, is that's a conservation, you're in a conservation subdivision, which allowed for smaller lots, 2-acre lots, perhaps they're bigger, but as low as 2 acres. And in that regard, the regulations provide for a separate parcel, either 40 or 50% of the land is dedicated to open space in exchange for smaller lots. So you get a bigger conservation area. And in that case, way back when, the Land Trust did assume control of that property and has those maintenance requirements. Now, what also is the case under our regulations, subdivision regulations, and in the typical declaration, which will be here, is that when the homeowners association takes over responsibility, there's specific required language to have all owners responsible, equally responsible, and can be assessed if there's any need to assess them for the proper maintenance consistent with the requirements of the approval of the open space area. And if there cannot be any changes to that, all are responsible, so everybody actually does watch everybody else, knowing if somebody creates a violation, they're all economically responsible. The town of Greenwich can step in, they can actually go in, remedy any problems, and that's the case also if the Land Trust didn't do their job, and they can assess each one of the owners for the cost of restoring anything that should be restored due to a violation. And you also have another declaration, a declaration of restrictions placed on these lots by the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency, which will have a separate set of conditions, some overlapping, to protect the open space areas, or what they call the buffer areas. So you're actually going to have zoning layer, conservation layer, and wetlands layer of protections for these lands.
Mr.
And
Tessie?
obviously, anyone could report a violation, and I'm done.
Okay, good, because the commission was waiting for you to address us again.
You said
Yeah.
to answer her, so I gave her my
Katie
usual
said that
long
you're
answer.
confusing us.
Okay.
Oh, no, I thought it was quite useful, thank you.
You thought
One
it was
fan.
quite useful.
Thank
Okay. You just needed to look at us occasionally.
Okay.
Okay.
So wait, when is this neighborhood association being formed?
The neighborhood association would have to be formed and be the recipient of the easement. There'll be a conveyance of the easement rights prior to the sale of the first lot. That's the way it reads now. And it would read the same. We would modify the declaration now to add the neighborhood association and put in that language and make it crystal clear that we're dealing with the assessment. The typical language in our current version of the declaration, which I would work on with staff, so that you get all these protections that you now have in your regulations.
So prior to the sale?
Prior to sale of a lot,
Right, so prior to the sale, you have to form the association.
right.
You have to revise the declaration.
Declaration, we're gonna work to revise right now. The sale is probably gonna take a while. I'm sure people would wanna go through wetlands, but
We
that's
wanna see-
typical.
So we want to see the revised,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It gets passed to you, and then you have it reviewed by the law department.
got it.
Absolutely. That, I expect those as conditions.
The question is, do you want to see that before?
No one ever sees it before. It's all a legal document.
All right,
And what are we exactly seeing? The forming of the
You're going to see a revised, and maybe we'll do it as an amended and restated, maybe better. I'm happy to talk to Mr. Declaration, conservation easement, that's going to incorporate everything that's in the existing regulation, but provide for a homeowners association to be the recipient. As an alternative, we'll leave in the possibility maybe Land Trust will change its mind, and provide that if it's the association, there are these assessment obligations that can be imposed on all of the owners. It's right in your standard language now that you hand out to applicants who are doing a conventional subdivision and need a declaration. So we're going to incorporate those into this declaration to make it crystal clear that in fact you've got these protections and you have these obligations of all of the three owners of those, four owners of those lots.
any other members of the public? Because when Ms. Guerrero started speaking, you came back up to answer her questions, but does anybody else want to speak? Yes, ma'am, but you have to come to the mic. And then
This is
Mr.
homeowners
Bonneman-
association, is this the people who already live on the street?
No,
Or
no,
you're
it's not-
talking about
No,
a
no, no,
completely
this is-
different homeowners
Their
association?
homeowners association.
That was my question.
We're talking
about the
Yeah.
owners of these three lots.
It's not you guys.
A new association.
A, B, and
It's
C.
their association. Sorry, we didn't make that clear. That's why when you said it's kind of a murky thing, I was like, well, how could it be murky when they haven't sold the lots yet?
So you're talking about a brand-new homeowners association being created for these parcels
Yeah.
of land?
Yes, ma'am.
And monitoring them so that in no way, shape, or form puts this responsibility on the current homeowners,
No, ma'am.
Any of the neighboring properties.
on any of the neighboring
But
properties.
again, as I told Mr. Bonneman, you keep an eye and make sure that open space is being respected.
Well, after it's been developed.
Yeah. Okay, so we're good? Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Tizzi, just a real quick question, I just want to
Yeah.
make sure I get this on the record. We have three lots, A, B, and C.
Right.
On your map, we have shaded area that's open space easement.
Yes.
No, no, it's not easement, it's actually.
Yeah, no, it's an easement. It's
but
an easement
deeded
over
open
each lot.
space. It is,
It's not deeded open space. It's open space by easement, by conservation easement, non-development, making it a non-development area.
Okay.
We have that at Conyers Farm. You've got that, you should be very familiar with Conyers Farm because that's what you have there.
Can you briefly just describe parcel X?
Yeah, parcel X as noted in the decision, is obviously a large parcel of land. It's not a separate lot. It is required by the decision and declaration to be part and parcel of Lot 3 in the Chateau Ridge Association. So it expands Lot 3. There's a long story. I'm happy to talk.
No, just understand it, it's actually, okay.
I just explained, I see 4 lots, but I only, you talked A, B, and C, what's the fourth?
That's
X.
parcel X that Mr. McAfee was referring to. Parcel X actually was added, was added to Lot 3 in the Chateau Ridge Association per the decision. It's not to be a separate building, despite the fact that it has 6 acres, it's not a separate lot. It's part and parcel of lot, it's an expanded lot number 3 from the Chateau Ridge Association.
Okay, was that
It doesn't have any frontage. It's not designed to be a lot. And I could tell you the history is how it got to that point.
Was that ever recorded on a map or anything? Or is
Oh,
it
yeah,
just part
that,
of-
this map, this is the
That's
recorded
it.
map. It's map number 7431.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
And there are notes that refer to that on the map.
Okay.
Great.
So, is everybody comfortable with closing this application?
Yes.
Okay, we're closing this application.
Thank you.
Okay, hurry up. Our next application,
Thank you.
Okay, we'll let somebody else sit. Victoria's next?
No, Peter.
Peter is seated. Yeah, Peter. So Victoria is seated on this application. Stephen A. and Alexandra M. Cohen for a final resub at 30 Crown Lane and 0 Meeting House Road. Good evening, Mr. Liebman.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, Larry Liebman representing the applicants Stephen and Allison Cohn for 30 Crown Lane. We are consolidating 30 Crown Lane with 0 Meeting House Road. The client has been in ownership, or our clients have owned the Meeting House Road property since 2005. And there is no, all we are asking is to remove the common lot line. I'll answer any questions if you like.
Anybody have any questions on this application? Any members of the public wish to speak on this application? Okay. With that, we will close this application.
Thank you.
All right, okay. Our next item is a discussion item. Well, first of all, could I take a motion on the proposed schedule for the commission for next year?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, closing the public hearing. Okay, I didn't make the stretch, but it was close.
Hold on.
Just move.
Ready? Okay. Move to approve the 2020 meeting schedule as amended for public hearings for the month of January through December 2020.
Yeah, we changed the August date, remember? Oh, my apologies, I told him to say as amended.
Motion to
Not-
approve meeting schedule for 2020 for public hearings of the Planning and Zoning Commission, January through December.
Second was Lowe, Hardman, whatever. Same time. Okay, our next item is the sign, the signage at Shreve Crump and Lowe. And this is a discussion item. Were you at our meeting yesterday?
I was not, no, but it was brought up at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you didn't attend, you guys didn't hear the discussion?
No, we
Okay,
did
so
not.
we
I did
kind
get
of,
a-
we talked about it a little bit, and how about? Okay, good. Okay, good. Oh, no, we have this already.
There was a couple of small changes that were made to the drawings in the back, just to make it a little easier to view. So you know exactly where everything is going and things like that. So I figured, just better than bring out a copy.
So the things that were added to this packet basically are the photographs in the very back, on the last page, as well as the, plan that was there, with the notation of exactly where the sign is going to be going on that, plan, and then a larger scale drawing of, a larger scale image actually of the sign that has already been made up on how it's going to look with the exact size denotion on it.
Okay, so it's it's a carved stone sign, 3 feet by 3 feet in size. That's what's existing out there now.
Excuse me?
That's what's existing out there on Greenwich Avenue on the
Correct, the
corner of-
Shreve Clump and Low sign that is there in 3x3 form is already on 2 spots.
Another copy of the handout, because he went to the bathroom and didn't get one, sorry.
And what's that sign made out of?
It is a stone.
Okay.
I have another, thank you.
And the proposal in front of us is to actually remove the directory sign on the north corner of the building and
Well, the the
replace it with.
directory, actually, it seems like the directory fell during a storm a little over a year ago.
So
So the
there's no
directory has been off. And one of the things we wanted to do was, give permission to clean up the stone that was there and,
Okay. So it's the same sign that's on the south corner, the new sign, similar in size, 3x3.
Correct.
Same graphic layout on the north corner.
Right,
You
the
have
sign-
approval
yeah.
for awnings already on the Lewis Street side?
What's that?
You have approval for the awnings already on the Lewis Street side?
I believe that's not something, I was involved in.
Okay. Okay. Does any other commissioner have a comment on this at all?
No, if, what we discussed yesterday, we're good.
Okay. So I think what we discussed, that it was actually appropriate to match in-kind, same sign that is on the corner, the south corner to the north corner. Similar in height, same size, same graphic layout.
Yep, and the signs are
unilluminated.
actually completely identical.
And it's made out of stone, engraved with a black letter, non-illuminated.
Correct.
Okay. Were you guys part and parcel to actually putting the light fixture in
What's that?
The light fixture.
above the door? Did you guys do that?
I did not do that, no.
Because we were wondering if it could be changed.
Doesn't seem like it's in the right place according to the original approvals.
Okay, what would you,
It wasn't located correctly,
okay.
so we were wondering if we could sort of do a trade.
Okay.
It seems like it's actually hanging too low. The drawing you just gave us, actually, drawing A2,
Mm-hmm.
the west elevation shows the front door. You can see how it's supposed to be hanging above all of the front door and the entablature above the front door.
Okay. Give me 1 second, let me pull that up on my phone. Just, I don't have that copy, that final
Oh, wait,
on this
this
sheet.
is, I have it, I just looked at it.
It's not
Oh,
in that
it's
one.
back to the same page.
No, I think he's talking about okay. That light,
The
okay.
center light.
Yeah,
Yes.
the center light, and how would you like it adjusted?
You just gave us a drawing. The drawing's labeled A2.
Mm-hmm.
On that drawing is a detail of the elevation, of the west elevation.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that it's actually hung higher above the front door and above the tablature above the front door.
Okay.
If you can actually remedy that, that would be
To drop it down
appreciated.
a bit.
Okay?
Okay.
Anything else? Great.
The stone was okay?
Yes.
You're gonna get your light fixture.
Yes.
Fixture is fixed.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right, all set?
Thank you.
Sounds good, thank you.
Will they get a letter?
Well, it'll be in the agenda, so your finding will be the letter, which we will then, have as minutes of this meeting that are in perpetuity, so.
Okay.
Sounds
It'll
great.
be recorded that way.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you. Appreciate the help, thank you.
Okay, so, folks. We got some decision items. How would you like to proceed, backwards or forwards?
Backwards, please.
Okay. So you're gonna do, the first thing you're gonna do is gonna be the Cohen at Crown Lane?
Yes.
Okay.
Hack together here first.
Now, they apply for a final resub, but it's actually a lot line revision, correct?
Right, so it's, okay, in the application of PLPZ,
Lot line revision. Oh, it's nothing.
it's nothing.
I'm gonna spend another 20 years never getting it.
That,
Really? Okay, go, Nick, sorry.
application PLPZ 2019-00346 for a final re-subdivision to merge two adjacent lots at 30 Crown Lane in 0 Meeting House Road, both in the RA4 zone. Motion to find that this is not a subdivision or re-subdivision of the properties, and that it conforms to all of the pertinent sections of the current subdivision regulations of the town of Greenwich.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, we're gonna do.
Yeah, this one's gonna be a little more complicated. Hold on a second.
Okay, so, we're gonna do the conditions on the,
Okay.
this is 11 Chateau Ridge.
Fox.
Fox.
Application PLPZ 2000. Cohen.
Oh, I was confused, yeah.
Victoria seconded it.
Not recused, you were going to the bathroom. Okay, so it's so I need a second on that motion? And Victoria has seconded?
I second it.
Okay. Thanks for being awake. Okay.
Application PLPZ 2019-00337, final re-subdivision, modified certain conditions approved under final subdivision 1474 at 11 Chateau Ridge Drive in the RA4 and RAC4 zones. Motion to find that it is not a final subdivision and to approve modification of certain conditions. As indicated in the comments from the Conservation Commission, sunken boulders located 15 feet apart on center have been found to be functionally appropriate as a means of demarcation of open space. The boulders can be installed at the time of each property development, understanding that each property will be returning for review by municipal agencies at the time of development. In addition, these could be used in combination with limited segments of lower stone walls, segment of stone walls being more useful in areas directly adjacent to areas of more intense residential development along, i.e. along the rear yard perimeter. At the time of development, a homeowners association will be created, the homeowners association would be created and an amendment to the conservation easements, providing that the.
At the time of the first sale.
Yes, at the time of the, yes, you're right.
Nice one, Dave.
Prior to the sale, the amendment to the conservation easement, providing of the homeowners association to maintain the open space as indicated on the plan, 1474, excuse me, that's the plan number. I think that's everything that covers that.
Okay. You asked for the, you did ask for the association agreement.
Yes.
All the documents, okay. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okey-doke. And now we have two different ones, because we have to do the merger first, before we do the site plan, on 24 and 28 Windrose Way. And then once, a consolidation. Two applications, and you can't approve the site plan if you haven't approved the combined lot.
Okay,
But
so.
you're combining two parcels, and the moment you combine two parcels, you have to do that decision first. You can't approve the site plan unless you combine the two parcels.
Right, but it's not, they've not proposed a re-subdivision or subdivision, they just proposed a consolidation of the lots, so you do have to take action on that, but you're taking.
We can do it all at the same time.
Yeah, because you're taking
Okay.
action on
All
the
right, I'm good.
consolidation, right?
Okay.
They didn't apply for the, formal action on the subdivision, right, it's just consolidation.
Okay, for the application PLPZ 2019-00335 and 00336 for final coastal site plan and special permit, at 24 and 28 Windrose Way in the RA2 zone and COZ zones. Motion to approve both applications with the following conditions. A map of lot merger would be filed to combine both lots. That the status of the Clomar be represented to staff. That prior to zoning permit, that the engineering division comments dated
9, 11, or 12.
staff to fill that in, be addressed prior to zoning and permit sign-off.
Engineering is 9/12.
9/12, okay.
Yeah, and on the Clomar, it has to be approved.
Prior to zoning permit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right.
Okay. It's noted that DEP has endorsed the project, that zoning.
And you said meet the conditions of the DPW comments,
Yeah,
right?
we're getting to that second. Zoning has endorsed the project subject to the Clomar, and that the conditions that indicated on the 9 and 12 note comments from the engineering be addressed. It is agreed that the commission is okay with that the applicant can proceed to zoning permit sign-off, even though the letter says resubmit prior to final.
I think we should make a finding that the applicant has submitted a new landscape plan that shows the 10-foot buffer, all the increased plantings, the trees being maintained, and all of that.
That
Which
is,
have received additional comments from the Conservation Department, who still requests, and we could include some of the comments that they had. And I'm saying all that for a reason.
and I think actually the landscape plan and drainage plan should be coordinated, so there's no interference or
Yes.
conflict.
Yep.
I think that's, it's actually noticed that, actually, one more thing is that the applicant's civil engineer have addressed the conservation issues in a memo dated September 16th, 2019, from the Rocco DeAndrea Incorporated Company. Anything else?
Do I have a second? Okay, before we vote, I'm a little struggling with this because we leaned very hard on Palmer Island to get more tidal buffer, and we got it. And we know that that's where the Environmental Protection Initiative is headed. And I'm disappointed that we were not able to get more from the applicant in this regard. And that, I don't know, they kept saying, well, this is robust and this is good enough. And I didn't feel like good enough was enough. So does anybody have thoughts on that? Because I'm really struggling with
think
that.
Palmer Island and this are totally dissimilar.
Because of
think-
the sensitivity of Palmer Island being higher?
No, because Palmer Island took an oversized lot and put two houses on and really shoehorned in. I think this expanded the lot, expanded the green space, I think, and kept the views open to the neighbors and work with the neighbors, and address the neighbors' issues. So I don't think this and Palmer Island are all alike.
Well, and Dave's point yesterday was, you know, this is less than the allowable FAR. It's only 16,000 square feet where they could have done 18,000. I get all that.
And the green space is, you know, another 5% more than the previous approval. Now, and I think that if you look at the property, there's nothing on this property that even gets close to Palmer Island where they put the gazebo in the setback.
Yep.
I think so. I again, as I said during the testimony, I think the 10-foot is an understatement. I think it goes from 20 to 10, and I think they achieve the balance. They're using a lot of upland plantings in terms of meadow mix and non-grass. They're trying to, I think one of the things we could do, and you mentioned it with the driveway, is if our DPW would allow structured porous pavement not to count as impervious, we would see
More
a
of it.
lot more of it. And we keep on harping on that, and it doesn't change. And so we're forcing developers and owners to put asphalt
Yeah.
in.
And actually, we supported that.
And
so.
same way with AstroTurf and
Yeah.
other things that we are our own, we are in contradictory territory between conservation and our engineering department.
Yeah, and we supported that DPW call. Okay.
I think, from,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's where I was going. No, but we're pushing on getting a bigger buffer where we can, and we just, you know, I know it's not what the regs, I know it's not required, but I would have liked to have seen it. I'm disappointed that we didn't get any concession, another concession. I would have liked to have seen that.
I think what,
Agreed. I'd
mean,
sort
I
of
think
say
that-
what, you know, a little bit of what Andy was saying, if you look at this holistically, I think it tends to sort of go to the side of the meter where it's
You're
pretty
comfortable.
responsible in terms of
There are
lower
208,
density,
there's
lower
280
lower
new
height.
trees.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
bought
new
in. I
trees.
just,
I mean, I think you look at the
Yeah.
total.
Okay. All right. All right then, so, all in favor?
aye.
All right. Do we have everybody? Was that 5-0?
Yes.
Did you? Yeah, okay. All right, we're done.
All right. You missed the 9:30.
I missed it by 4 minutes.